Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Diogo Goncalves. Diogo Goncalves, born in 1999 in the city of Albura, Portugal, is an only child in a poor but hardworking family. His family made a living mainly from the unstable tourism industry. His parents always considered Diogo a good son. Those who knew him described Diogo as kind, responsible, hardworking, reliable, and very friendly. He enjoyed making friends and was close to his family. Diogo attended high school in his hometown. After graduating, he began studying computer science. To pay for his studies and living expenses, Diogo applied for a job at McDonald's in 2015, at the age of 16. When he was 17, his life suddenly took a major turn when his father suffered a stroke and fell into a vegetative state. That same year, while Diogo and his mother were trying to cope with his father's difficult situation, another tragedy occurred. Diogo's mother, who had always supported him in his studies and upbringing, was involved in a traffic accident. While she was on her way to work at the shopping mall where she worked as a cleaner, a car hit her, dragging her for several meters and causing her to die from her injuries. Although the driver fled, the police identified him and brought him to court. While Diogo awaited the verdict on the perpetrator of his mother's death, he had to move to a medical facility to receive the necessary care. His aunt, concerned about Diogo's situation, invited him to live with her, but the two had a serious disagreement. After a few weeks, they could no longer live together. Diogo told a friend about his situation, and the friend's parents offered him a room in their house in the Albufeira neighborhood. Here, Diogo was close to friends and people who helped him feel at home. Despite his young age, Diogo has shown an excellent ability to handle and overcome difficulties with patience and optimism. In 2017, at the age of 18, Diogo graduated with a degree in computer technology and completed a 6-month internship at Villa Vida Park, a top 5-star hotel. Diogo's abilities impressed the directors, and they offered him a job at the hotel as a technician. In 2018, Diogo decided to accept the offer and left the fast food chain where he had worked for almost a year as a shift manager. He entered a new phase of his life, envisioning a future filled with opportunities that would help him rise above the hardships he had experienced. After working at the company for a while and contemplating brighter days, he decided to buy a car. Diogo got along well with his colleagues, especially a girl he had a crush on, Maria Malvero, a 19-year-old hotel security guard. Maria Malvero was born into a normal family and, like Diogo, has gone through many hardships. Her mother suffered from mental illness, and her father left when she was very young, leaving her never to see him again. Maria, who works in security, became interested in martial arts and started practicing karate. She dreamed of becoming a police officer but was rejected by the academy because of her tattoos. This frustrated her, and she decided to join the SEER Info training course, which specializes in training security guards for the private security sector. Diogo has feelings for Maria and has expressed them openly to her from the beginning, but she does not reciprocate and maintains a cold attitude. Diogo is very fond of Maria, so much so that he turns down an attractive job at the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon just because he does not want to be away from her. He often brings her meals while she is on duty. Over time, Diogo and Maria became close, and people around them saw them as a couple, although there was no romantic relationship between them. Maria told Diogo that she did not want a relationship with him because she had just gotten out of a toxic relationship with a naval officer. However, she kept in touch with Diogo, causing him to harbor hopes of a future with her. Diogo did not give up hope and always tried to be close to her and please her. One day, Diogo was devastated when he accidentally saw a video on social media of Maria kissing another girl. Diogo was upset because he thought she should have told him that she didn't like boys, which was why they would never be together. Diogo's best friend, Fabio, tried to reassure him by saying that girls sometimes do that, but Diogo didn't believe him and insisted that Maria had lied to him, which was why she refused to be with him. Despite his disappointment, Diogo and Maria remained friends, and Maria continued to accept his gifts and invitations to dates. Diogo tried to take her home several times, but she always told him that her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and she didn't want to let another man into her apartment. Time passed, and in December 2019, Diogo was informed that he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which had occurred 3 years earlier. After receiving the sum of 70,000 euros, the young man decided it was time to buy a house so that he would no longer have to pay rent. Diogo shared the news of his mother's insurance money with Maria. A few weeks later, Maria decided to quit her job at the hotel. She said that she could no longer bear the comments of her colleagues about her alleged relationship with Diogo. Maria also justified it by saying that she wanted to spend more time with her mother, who needed more attention because of her mental illness. At that time, Diogo had no reason to doubt Maria's words. However, later events showed that her decision to quit her job at the hotel was for darker reasons, and that is when the third character in the story, Mariana, 20, appears. She works as a nurse at the hospital and has a stable relationship with Maria. Maria and Mariana live together at Mariana's parents' house, as they are not yet financially stable enough to have their own house where they can enjoy their relationship. This is exactly Maria's plan when she learns about the large amount of money that Diogo will receive. From that moment on, Maria begins to get closer to Diogo. It turns out that Maria has shared information with Mariana, and together they decide to trick Diogo into gaining access to his bank account data and steal the money he received. The problem arises when one day, after being rejected by Maria several times, Maria suddenly tells Diogo that she wants to spend a romantic evening with him. This was truly a gift for Diogo. He couldn't believe his ears. After waiting so long, the thought of being with the girl he loved made him extremely happy. The meeting was set for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was delighted and had no idea why the girl suddenly changed her mind. As soon as Diogo entered, Mariana gave him the orange juice she had brought herself, but the drink contained an unexpected ingredient: 3 ampoules of diazepam, a central nervous system drug with anti-anxiety and sedative effects. Mariana was the one who suggested using this substance, having stolen the drug from the hospital where she worked. Mariana's plan was to anesthetize Diogo, access his bank information, and possibly manipulate his fingers to bypass the phone lock. Mariana is said to have waited in a car outside the house while her friend carried out the plan. She even texted Maria several times to see if the drug was working, as it took longer than she had anticipated. The situation inside the house became increasingly tense. Diogo did not understand what was happening and began to get anxious. Maria then tried to calm him down by promising to dance erotically, but first, she had to tie him to a table. After being in that position for a few minutes, Diogo panicked and asked Maria to let him go, but she became aggressive and began to beat Diogo. Using her martial arts skills, Maria overpowered Diogo, knocked him to the floor, and wrapped her arms around his neck, preventing him from breathing. According to Mariana, Maria then told her to go inside the apartment, and when she entered, she found Diogo lying on the floor. Mariana asked Maria what happened and criticized her for going off plan. The original plan was just to steal the key and take his money. When Diogo was unresponsive, Mariana performed CPR. However, when he regained consciousness, he became very agitated and tried to attack Mariana. In response to Diogo's reaction, Maria overpowered him by grabbing him from behind, throwing him to the floor, and strangling him again. Diogo lost his life at the hands of the girl he loved. His body was found in Maria and Mariana's living room, and soon after, they began their evil plan. They cut off his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, log into the mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process lasted for several days due to the daily transaction limit at that time. Since Diogo was scheduled to go to work the next day, Maria and Mariana devised a plan to prevent Diogo's co-workers from discovering his absence. Maria and Mariana impersonated Diogo to text one of his co-workers. The colleague received a message from Diogo's number, saying that he would not be able to come to work and needed a replacement. However, this message seemed like an unannounced absence, which was unlike Diogo, who did not like to change shifts, so the message felt strange to the colleague. The colleague then asked Diogo if there was a problem and was told that everything was fine. The conversation with the hotel staff and people close to Diogo continued throughout Friday and part of Saturday, but these messages were increasingly uncharacteristic of him. On Saturday morning, Diogo's boss received a text message saying that he would not be returning to work because he had met a French woman and was moving in with her. This story seemed very strange to the boss because Diogo was a responsible person and would never quit his job so suddenly. In search of answers, the boss started calling Diogo, but he did not answer. He then received another message saying that he was not well enough to talk on the phone. Diogo's boss replied that he could only calm down if they could talk. He wanted to hear his voice and his explanation for what was happening. The reactions of Diogo's relatives to the messages Maria and Mariana sent convinced the girls to change their plans to explain their boyfriend's sudden disappearance. They decided to make it seem as if Diogo had decided to end his life and planned to dismember his body to get rid of the evidence. Maria later claimed that they were inspired by the TV show Dexter, about a forensic scientist who kills criminals and evades justice by removing traces of his crimes by dismembering his victims. After carrying out their evil plot, they stuffed Diogo's body into a trash bag and put it in the trunk of their car. They went to an ATM and shopped at a mall, where their hugs and laughter were captured on security cameras. They then went to a resident's house to begin dismembering the victim. Finally, Maria and Mariana placed Diogo's body in a black bag and put the rest of the body in a container. Meanwhile, at Mariana's parents' house, Diogo's friends launched a campaign to report him missing and contacted the authorities. They had to wait the required 48 hours to officially declare him missing. Maria and Mariana then left the house. Maria drove Diogo's car to the cliffs near the San Vicente Lighthouse in Cabo. Mariana followed Maria in her car. At around 2 p.m. that same day, Mariana threw Diogo's body off the cliff. She then left Diogo's car nearby. They thought that this way they could make it look like Diogo had committed suicide. Maria had no idea that instead of falling into the sea, the body would get stuck on a rock. They then left together in Mariana's car. They drove about 7 kilometers in 12 minutes to the Inferno Dago waterfall in the town of Tavira, where they threw Diogo's remains into the water. Shortly thereafter, Diogo's car was discovered in a parking lot near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. According to multiple sources, 2 laptops were found in the car. Police were called to the scene and conducted a search on both land and sea. As a result, the body of a young man was discovered, partially covered by a black trash bag. At the same time, at another location on the coast, a French couple was stunned to discover Diogo's head. Diogo's hands and feet were also found after a thorough police search. Investigators said the circumstances of Diogo's death were strange. He was brutally murdered despite being a quiet person who did not associate with people of questionable reputation. Investigators could not find any hostile forces against Diogo. The police continued to investigate and soon discovered that Diogo had received a large inheritance after the death of his mother. Through the wire transfer investigation, they discovered that a large sum of money had been transferred from Diogo's account to Maria. Detectives tracked down Maria to find out why Diogo's money had ended up in her hands. Maria tried to convince the police that she had killed Diogo because he had abused her. Maria claimed that was the reason she had left the hotel before the incident. However, when police examined text messages between the victim and Maria, they found this was not true. Maria said that she and Diogo had become close after she left her job. During her first meeting with the police, Maria claimed that she was the only person responsible for planning and carrying out the shooting. Maria insisted that Mariana had nothing to do with the crime. However, Mariana's testimony contradicted Maria's. Mariana explained that Maria said she wanted to rob Diogo of his money and intended to kill him. Mariana said Maria wanted to make him suffer so that he would give her his bank account password. The evidence gathered by investigators was enough to convict Maria and Mariana. Detectives had Diogo's phone records, cell phone records, and ATM surveillance video. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and appeared in court in June of that year. The judge followed Maria's account of the events, and Maria pleaded guilty while repeatedly denying Mariana's involvement in the case. She said Diogo's body had been in a suitcase in a car parked in the garage for 2 days, and that's where the remains were dismembered. The judge then asked Mariana where she was when Diogo's body was dismembered. It was notable that the joints of the body were separated with great precision. All eyes in the courtroom were on Mariana, who was also a longtime nurse. Mariana answered all the questions and said that everyone knew she worked at the hospital, so they suspected that she was the one who dismembered the body. She further explained that using the internet, the matter could be cleared up. The judge ordered Maria and Mariana to be detained because this was a serious crime under the law. The crime was committed in a cold, calculated, reckless, and extremely cruel manner. A few months later, the trial took place on February 24, 2021. In her testimony at the trial on February 26, 2021, Maria stated that she initially sought revenge on Diogo for his violent behavior but did not intend to kill him. She admitted that her goal was to humiliate him. Maria also confirmed that her friend had no connection with Diogo and did not know about the murder. Maria argued that her actions were not motivated by Diogo's money. In addition, Maria and Mariana attended the trial together but avoided looking at each other. It was rumored that after their arrest and imprisonment, they ended their relationship. On April 27, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Maria was found guilty of aggravated murder, complicity in indignity to a corpse, robbery, unlawful access, fraud, carjacking, and illegal possession of a weapon. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison and ordered to pay €265,000 in compensation to Diogo's father. Mariana was acquitted of murder but convicted of desecration of a corpse, complicity, and fraud. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison for these charges. However, she was released because the charges she was convicted of did not require pre-trial detention until the final verdict was delivered. The court determined that Mariana's attempt to revive Diogo showed that she had no intention of killing him. The judge took into account Mariana's confession, in which she accepted full responsibility for her actions. Despite this, the Portuguese public disagreed with the verdict, considering Mariana as guilty as Maria of the crimes against Diogo. After the verdict, Mariana left the court through the back door, where her father, who had attended all the hearings, was waiting for her. Neither Mariana nor her father would speak to reporters. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily was born in the coastal town of Saintsue, New South Wales, Australia in May 2002. She was the first child of the close-knit James family and was especially loved by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up, Lily spent much of her time by the ocean with her younger brother Max, where she developed a passion for swimming and an active lifestyle. Her father, a water polo coach at an Anglican girls' school in Hustville, encouraged her interest in the sport. Those who knew Lily remembered her as a friendly and outgoing person who excelled in her studies and was always willing to help those in need. Her well-rounded personality made her a standout student, and she was widely respected by her peers. With her impressive talent and dedication, Lily succeeded in multiple areas, including academia, sports, and community service. She was also an accomplished performer, participating in her school's theater and dance club. Eventually, Lily's talents caught the attention of organizers from the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attracting over 125,000 attendees from around the world. As part of the celebrations, Lily performed a unique monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Her performance showcased her impressive skills, charisma, and stage presence, earning her a standing ovation and the jury's approval. She achieved second place in the theater category, a remarkable achievement that earned her recognition and a significant prize. In 2018, Lily achieved another milestone when she passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic talents also flourished, particularly in water polo, a sport she began competing in professionally, following in her father's footsteps. She won the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category, a feat that delighted her parents. By her final year of school, Lily had decided to pursue a career in sports, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to study sports business management. A turning point in her life. In early 2021, she started a new chapter. To break up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Her youthful energy, vibrant personality, and passion for sports quickly won over her colleagues, the school administration, and the students she was coaching. The students looked up to her and tried to meet her high standards. In return, she sought to understand each student's unique needs and strengths. That's when she met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach. His impressive skills and charismatic presence quickly made him the center of attention. As a part-time teacher at another school and a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, Paul was a driven and accomplished young man. He was particularly popular among the female students and staff. However, opinions about him were divided. Some saw him as arrogant and stubborn, while others appreciated his positive qualities. Initially, Lily and Paul's interactions were friendly but brief, limited to exchanging greetings. Over time, their relationship evolved into something more. Lily's friends reported that Paul asked her out on a date, and she found it difficult to say no due to his charming smile. The date had a profound impact on both of them, leading to a decision to meet again. As Lily got to know Paul better, she began to develop feelings for him, unaware of his true nature. Her kindness and openness made her vulnerable to falling in love. Paul appeared to return her affection, frequently complimenting her, giving her flowers, and planning evenings together. They decided to keep their relationship a secret, especially from the students at school. Lily and her boyfriend, Paul, had agreed to keep their relationship private, adhering to the school's policy and Lily's personal preference for discretion. However, as time passed, rumors about their relationship began to circulate, evolving from hushed whispers to open discussions. When Lily discovered that Paul was the one who had revealed their relationship, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Paul's portrayal of her had also led to criticism and judgment from others, causing Lily to feel humiliated. As a result, she confronted Paul about his actions and ended their relationship. Despite Paul's subsequent attempts to apologize and reconcile, Lily remained resolute in her decision. She took some comfort in the fact that their relationship had been brief, allowing her to see Paul's true nature before things escalated further. Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands to a wealthy and influential family. When his father's job required a relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family made the move. As an only child, Paul received excessive attention and care from his parents, which significantly contributed to his character development. Unfortunately, this upbringing led to Paul growing up with an entitled and self-centered attitude. Paul was a high-achieving student who excelled academically, athletically, and was physically fit. After moving to a new location, he attended St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team and quickly gained recognition and respect from his peers for his exceptional skills. He eventually became the team captain and actively participated in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While he was well-liked by many, particularly they who found him charming, some of his male peers were put off by his confidence and boasts about his ability to win over any girl. Despite this, Paul's charm and charisma earned him many admirers. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey, which he gladly accepted. He quickly took on a leadership role and successfully managed these sections, feeling confident in his abilities. However, by early 2018, he surprisingly resigned and returned home with his family, citing unknown reasons for his departure. Back home, Paul decided to further his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. Paul had a conversation with old friends and mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which led to a job offer from his former employer. He returned to Australia and started working at the familiar school in early 2020. To reduce living expenses, Paul agreed to share an apartment with a friend in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, they enjoyed each other's company, socializing after work. However, a few months later, they had a disagreement, and Paul decided to live alone. His parents, who he couldn't visit due to the pandemic, felt that Paul was lonely despite being busy and surrounded by people. They weren't aware of any romantic relationships in his life. By the summer of 2021, as Paul resumed his regular activities, people began to notice a change in his behavior and personality. He picked up where he left off in the sports world, regaining his status as a key player on the hockey team and continuing his active lifestyle, even featuring in promotional advertisements. At the same time, those who knew him observed emerging characteristics that were not present before. Uncontrollable outbursts of anger became a concern. Furthermore, rumors circulated within the school community about his unusual interest in his female students. He would often engage in flirtatious behavior with teenage girls, staring at them for extended periods, leaving them visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. Paul's importance in the hockey team's progress to the Australian Hockey League finals was evident despite the turmoil in his personal life. His recent breakup with Lily was likely a significant blow to his ego. Unexpected, on October 26, 2023, at approximately 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents announcing the school's closure until the end of the week due to a critical incident. A tragedy occurred at the school, prompting a thorough investigation. On Thursday and Friday, a 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to support those affected. Forensic teams meticulously searched the school building and surrounding area, gathering evidence. The gym was closed off, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition due to the disturbing discovery made there. The incident began to unfold when the body of a 20-year-old woman was found in the shower around midnight. She had been seen alive just hours earlier. The water polo coach had entered the shower but never emerged. Surveillance footage revealed that someone had followed her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left the area alone, heading towards the school exit. A family member was later asked to identify the body due to severe facial damage. The victim was identified as Lily James. As the police delved deeper into the case, surveillance footage played a crucial role, and the prime suspect, a young man, was caught on camera multiple times. Investigations were launched into Paul and Lily's cell phone records, helping police track the suspect's last known location using GPS. They also sought to recover the victim's phone, hoping to uncover evidence through text messages that could shed light on the events leading up to the crime. After successfully locating the devices, the police reconstructed the sequence of events, revealing that Paul had purchased a hammer from a hardware store just days before the crime. It seemed he was consumed by anger toward the victim and had planned a confrontation. On the morning of October 25th, Lily followed her routine, attending the university and then heading to her job in the afternoon. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend had other plans. Paul rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, avoiding the building since he had no classes scheduled. He waited in the car, patiently biding his time. Once the students cleared out, he walked into the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket to avoid drawing attention. From this vantage point, Paul observed Lily's movements, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. When Lily finished her training session and decided to take a shower, Paul saw his chance and followed her. An argument erupted, and in the heat of the moment, Paul attacked Lily, striking her head with the hammer. According to the pathologists, the impact was fatal, and Lily died instantly, without suffering. After waiting for an hour, Paul collected Lily's belongings and left the building. He then drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a trash can. Security cameras captured footage of him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. His last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in the eastern Sydney suburb of Vaucluse. As the community was still reeling from the initial tragedy, another shocking event occurred. On October 27th, at 8 a.m., shopkeepers at Diamond Bay Reserve in Sydney's eastern suburbs made a disturbing discovery. A man's body was found just 11 miles away from the site of the first crime. A rescue team, including a bomb squad and Marine Corps personnel, was formed to retrieve the body. The body was recovered at 3:30 p.m. and taken for identification. Due to severe injuries, fingerprints were used to identify the individual. The victim was 24-year-old Paul, the same person who had been at the scene of the first crime. The investigation team faced a significant challenge in establishing a connection between the fatal incidents and uncovering the circumstances surrounding the events. The Gap is a notorious location with a history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to her father, possibly revealing the location of her body. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but hung up quickly. When police arrived at the cliff, they found the personal belongings of Lily and Paul, but there was no sign of him. A rented car was parked nearby, suggesting that he may have taken his own life due to feelings of guilt or fear of facing the consequences of his actions. On October 26th, police launched a search operation for his body, using helicopters and boats to scour the coastline. The first day's efforts were unsuccessful, but the next day, a body was found on rocks in a nearby nature reserve. With Paul deceased, the case was closed, and his parents collected his body, opting to cremate it in Sydney. A meeting was subsequently arranged with Tim Watson-Monro, a renowned forensic psychologist with extensive experience in analyzing the behavior of both criminals and victims. Mr. Watson-Monro was asked to share his insights on the incident and analyze the behavior of the perpetrator, Paul. According to Mr. Watson-Monro, Paul's actions were characteristic of individuals with an inflated sense of self-importance who struggle to accept rejection. He believed that Paul committed the crime in a premeditated and calculating manner, showing no remorse for his actions. When asked about Paul's decision to end his own life, Mr. Watson-Monro provided an explanation. Mr. Watson portrays Paul as a self-centered individual with psychopathic traits. Some have compared the tragic events to the finale of Romeo and Juliet, but the story of Lily and Paul is unique and unfolds in a distinct way. A genuine love relationship cannot thrive with pride, dishonesty, and betrayal. Unfortunately, Paul failed to grasp this, leading him to overlook the value of the person beside him. His decision to prioritize his own wounded ego ultimately resulted in the loss of a bright and vibrant life. This not only caused lasting pain for Lily's family but also for Paul's own loved ones. Regrettably, his actions left a devastating impact on those around him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to Lisa and Jay Poston. He had a strong and loving bond with his three sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth, throughout his life. Growing up, Ryan had the opportunity to travel extensively and attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. This exposure broadened his horizons and gave him an adventurous spirit. Ryan was also known for his striking good looks, which, coupled with his charismatic personality, made him stand out in a crowd. After graduating from high school, Ryan attended Indiana University, where he earned a degree in political science, history, and geography. He excelled academically and graduated with honors in 2005. Following in the footsteps of his family members, Ryan pursued a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Driven by his admiration for the legal profession, his esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys, were his role models. Ryan's ultimate goal was to own a successful law firm. While in Cincinnati, Ohio, Ryan dedicated himself to helping people who couldn't afford expensive lawyers. Despite being young, he had already built a strong reputation, and many sought his advice. He worked hard to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of their financial situation. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin Carissa for comfort and support. During a visit to Lexington, Kentucky to spend time with her, he met Shayna Hubers, a Lexington native, and his life took an unexpected turn. Shayna Hubers embodied the quintessential Southern girl, renowned for her outgoing personality and effortless ability to form friendships. Her warm and charming demeanor naturally drew people to her. After graduating high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she continued her education at the University of Kentucky, majoring in psychology, before pursuing her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their 8-year age gap, Ryan was 29, while Shayna was just 21. Their feelings for each other grew increasingly undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to see his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself devoting more time to Shayna. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Shayna began spending more time in Highland Heights, the Kentucky suburb where Ryan lived. Every weekend, she would pack a bag and visit Ryan's home, dedicating herself to taking care of him, cooking his meals, and cleaning his living space. As time went on, Ryan and Shayna's relationship grew stronger, and he took her to meet his parents. She was over the moon with excitement, telling her friends all about Ryan and even saying she wanted to become Mrs. Ryan Poston. But their promising future came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. In a panicked call to the police, Shayna admitted to fatally shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared revealed a devastating scene of domestic violence that had spun out of control. According to Shayna, Ryan had tried to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she attempted to gather her belongings. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan had confronted her with a gun, leading to a physical fight. In the heat of the moment, Shayna managed to grab the gun, but she was intimidated by Ryan's size. In a state of panic, she pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. Shayna admitted that she believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she claimed she wanted to end his suffering. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan was in distress, making unusual sounds, which motivated her to shoot him several more times. Afterwards, she revealed that she left the gun on a bookshelf. Minutes after Shayna called 911 to report that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were sent to the scene. When they arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually followed their orders. As she walked out, they told her to lie face down on the ground. It was clear that Shayna was very upset as she complied with their instructions. After the officers handcuffed Shayna and put her in the back of their patrol car, they entered the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived and examined Ryan's condo, which looked a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. They found that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic gun that Shayna used to shoot him. Based on the evidence they gathered, the investigators concluded that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna opened fire. They knew this because of the blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were not disturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Ryan's apartment, gathering every detail. At the same time, police officers questioned Ryan's neighbors to see if they had any information that could help the case. One of Ryan's neighbors, a woman named Nikki, spoke to the detective and provided some useful insights. Nikki knew Shayna well and thought that Shayna was more committed to Ryan than he was to her. According to Nikki, the couple often had loud, angry arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Nikki remembered a specific incident several months ago when Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna had told Nikki that she and Ryan had a violent fight, during which he lifted her up and threw her down the hallway, causing her injuries. Nikki believed Shayna and encouraged her to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna decided not to take legal action. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about the shooting of her boyfriend, Ryan. Before starting the interview, the officers read Shayna her Miranda rights, reminding her that she had the right to have an attorney present. Shayna chose to exercise this right and asked for a lawyer to be present. While waiting in the interrogation room, Shayna filled out some paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite having asked for a lawyer, Shayna still chatted with the detective. When asked who the victim was, Shayna calmly replied that it was the man she had killed. This response showed a clear lack of emotion, as it was obvious she knew the victim was Ryan, her long-term boyfriend. Shayna remained in the interrogation room with the detectives, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. She recounted the events of the previous night, describing how Ryan had allegedly grabbed her by the throat and violently thrown her around the apartment. At some point during the investigation, the detective temporarily left the room, replaced by another officer. Shayna began to reveal more details about her encounter with Ryan to this new officer. She alleged that Ryan had been extremely aggressive prior to the shooting, hurling insults at her, calling her crazy, and taunting her while brandishing a gun. Shayna believed that Ryan's behavior that night was fueled by drug use, which contributed to his violent outbursts. Throughout the interview, Shayna consistently stuck to her version of the events that culminated in the shooting. She claimed that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table, handling ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol, when she noticed him staring aggressively at her from across the table. At that moment, she became aware of his intentions and realized he was trying to evict her from his condo. Shayna confessed to picking up the gun and firing it in the midst of the chaos, hitting Ryan with a single bullet. Shayna continued to describe the incident, claiming that after shooting Ryan once, she saw him twitching. Believing it was necessary to end his suffering, she fired multiple shots, ultimately killing him. In her confession, Shayna told the detective that Ryan was vain and had mentioned wanting a nose job, so she decided to grant him his wish. She deliberately aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, essentially giving him the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the intense interrogation, Shayna expressed deep concerns about the impact of the incident on her academic performance and her future romantic relationships. She confided in the detective that having a dead boyfriend would make it difficult for her to find someone to marry, especially if they discovered she had killed him in self-defense. Despite her statement, the detective arrested and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna seemed genuinely surprised by her arrest, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor compared Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, emphasizing the striking similarities between the two cases. This heightened the tension in the courtroom as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her ex-boyfriend, Ryan. According to the prosecution, Ryan dominated Shayna's thoughts, and she constantly discussed him. During the trial, the prosecutor presented testimony from Ryan's friends, who described his plans to end the relationship with Shayna and his efforts to avoid her phone calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna continued to visit Ryan's condo in Highland Heights uninvited, including on the night of the murder. The prosecution introduced evidence that Ryan had scheduled a date with Audrey Bolt, a former Miss Ohio, on the night of the murder. This information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was driven by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she was supposed to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder, but he failed to appear. It wasn't until later that she learned of his murder. The prosecution also presented evidence that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shayna in the days leading up to his death. Ryan had sought advice from his father, Jay, on how to handle the situation, and Jay had counseled him to be kind to Shayna to avoid a messy breakup. However, it appears that Shayna continued to exert control over Ryan on the day he was killed. The prosecution presented evidence of several text exchanges between Ryan and Shayna, in which Ryan clearly told her he did not want to see her that weekend because he had other commitments. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up uninvited at his condo, which was not unusual for her. The argument that ensued reached a boiling point when Ryan explicitly told Shayna their relationship was over and she could no longer control him. Prosecutors argued that this statement enraged Shayna, prompting her to pick up a gun and fatally shoot Ryan. During Shayna's trial for murdering Ryan, the prosecution showed a video of her being questioned by the police to suggest she was a cold-blooded killer. In the video, Shayna's calm behavior and responses seemed to back up the idea that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed her dancing and singing along to music, which seemed unusual for someone who had just killed their loved one in self-defense. Normally, people in such a situation would be distraught and crying due to the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's goal in showing the video was to make Shayna appear detached and unemotional, implying that her actions were not those of someone who had acted in self-defense. They claimed that her lack of tears and carefree behavior proved her guilt. However, this interpretation was open to debate and up to the jury to decide. In the end, the video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna, but it was just one part of the evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a clear storyline throughout her trial, arguing that Ryan was the aggressive and violent one on the night of the incident, leading Shayna to shoot him. To back up this claim, they built a picture of Ryan's mental state, suggesting that a mix of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines, contributed significantly to his behavior. The defense team presented the jury with autopsy results showing the presence of these drugs in Ryan's system, strengthening their argument that the drugs influenced his actions. An expert toxicologist testified for Shayna, stating that a combination of drugs like anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. This testimony aimed to provide a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, implying that she may not have intended to harm Ryan. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution grew increasingly worried that she might be acquitted due to being a smart, young, and attractive woman, and that her self-defense claim might persuade the jury. However, on April 23rd, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the August 2015 sentencing hearing, Shayna persisted in shifting the blame for Ryan's death onto him, which infuriated his friends and family. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial, Shayna stuck to her claim of innocence and refused to acknowledge her role in the events. Under Kentucky law, a defendant who is deemed a victim of domestic violence can be eligible for early parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case ruled that Shayna did not meet the criteria, characterizing her crime as a premeditated murder. As a result, the judge handed down a 40-year prison sentence, making Shayna eligible for parole in 17 years, when she will be 41 years old in 2032. Shayna Hubers was sentenced, but she appealed for a new trial, which was granted by a judge in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had failed to disclose their felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law since felons are not allowed to serve on juries. Following a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston began in August 2018. During the opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney claimed that throughout her year-and-a-half-long relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their romance suffered because of it. The attorney stated that on the very first night Shayna and Ryan met, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting effect on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages after that. Shayna's defense lawyers claimed that her high school experience of sexual assault led to a history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They argued that this traumatic event contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team aimed to create a sympathetic image of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that her behavior was the result of a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. The defense portrayed Shayna as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They claimed that her actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but by years of abuse by her former partner. According to the defense, Ryan constantly criticized Shayna about her weight and chest size, pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant pressure contributed to her low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy, the defense argued. The defense claimed that Ryan and Shayna's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent disagreements and frustration from both parties. According to the defense, Ryan yearned for a more romantic and intimate connection, but this desire was not fulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. To support this claim, the defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought an injection to improve her romantic life, which was meant to address the couple's sexual difficulties and strengthen their bond. However, the defense argued that Ryan's consistent rejection and disinterest worsened the strain on their relationship, causing Shayna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Moreover, the defense alleged that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to engage in conversations with other women. In contrast, the prosecution stated that while Ryan Poston was not a perfect boyfriend, he was not abusive. They argued that Shayna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan, but rather because he had ended their relationship that night. The prosecution claimed that it was time for Ryan to break up with Shayna, as she refused to leave him alone despite the breakup, demonstrating her inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's co-workers testified that the breakup between Ryan and Shayna would be permanent this time because Ryan had always avoided breaking up with Shayna in person. According to the co-worker, Shayna had made every effort to keep Ryan. The prosecution presented text messages in which Shayna told her friends that she and Ryan's romantic encounters had brought them closer together. However, Shayna testified that these encounters had actually driven them apart. In another text message exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants, which had reduced his sex drive due to the medication's side effects. However, when Shayna testified, she claimed that Ryan had forced her into sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan, despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she begged the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, arguing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact people's lives. The mother acknowledged, however, that her pleas did not minimize the grief and pain experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Shayna was given a life sentence with no chance of parole. As part of her sentence, she must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Ray Greenberg was born in New York in June 1993 to Santa and George Greenberg. As their only child, she grew up in a loving and nurturing environment. During her high school years, Ellen was a dedicated team player and demonstrated great athletic potential. She was characterized as energetic, restless, and outgoing, yet she also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduating from high school, Ellen attended Pennsylvania State University, where she earned a degree in public relations. However, she soon realized this wasn't the career path she wanted to pursue. In parallel with her job, she enrolled in a pedagogical institute's correspondence department, and a few years later, successfully defended her diploma. Ellen then relocated to Philadelphia, where she landed a job as a junior high school teacher. Ellen's life was thriving, according to her relatives. She was bursting with enthusiasm, making ambitious plans for the future, and absolutely loved her work with students. It was during this period that she met Samuel, also known as Sam Greenberg, a young man from a wealthy and prominent family in the city. Sam's parents ran a large business, and his uncle was renowned as one of the top lawyers in the state. The two met in 2009 at a party through mutual friends and instantly clicked. Their friendly banter soon turned into a whirlwind romance, and they decided to move in together shortly after. As the clock struck 2011, on New Year's Eve, Sam proposed to Ellen, and the couple began making preparations for their spring wedding that same year. The news was met with joy from both families, and it seemed that nothing could come between the happy couple. Ellen threw herself into the delightful tasks associated with wedding planning, including drawing up guest lists, sending out invitations, choosing a venue and decorations, trying on wedding dresses, and organizing their honeymoon. Notably, Ellen took the reins on these preparations, with the groom seemingly uninvolved, although their loved ones didn't think much of it at the time. On January 26, 2011, a severe snowstorm hit the city. Ellen went to school as usual, but classes were canceled around noon due to strong winds and a blizzard, and students and teachers were sent home. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Sam. Later that day, the couple allegedly had a disagreement, which Sam initially confirmed but later denied. At around 5 p.m., Sam went to the gym in their apartment complex. When he returned, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. Sam first knocked loudly, then called out to Ellen by name, drawing the attention of their neighbors. He also tried calling her phone and sending messages, but there was no response to his knocking, calling, and yelling. However, it was clear that Ellen's phone was still inside the apartment. Sam went to the first floor of the building to ask the security guard for help. He explained the situation and asked if it was possible to open the front door, but the guard said he didn't have the authority to do so and couldn't leave his post. Sam returned to his floor, determined to take action. He used his shoulder to force open the door, managing to break the latch on the first try. As he entered the kitchen, he was met with a horrific sight. Ellen was sitting on the floor, her back against the cabinet door, her body brutally slashed with a knife and her clothes covered in blood. Sam immediately called emergency services, describing the scene. When asked to check Ellen's pulse, Sam hesitated, repeatedly asking if it was really necessary. Then there was a pause before he suddenly announced that there was a knife stuck in Ellen's chest, which he claimed he hadn't noticed until that moment. He concluded that Ellen was clearly already dead. The police officers who responded to the call were taken aback, having never encountered a scene like this in their extensive careers. They found the door locked from the inside with a latch, which Sam had later dislodged with his shoulder. There was no evidence of forced entry or intruders in the room. Nothing had been stolen from the apartment, and all valuables and cash remained untouched. The officers noted that nothing appeared to have been searched or disturbed. However, the most striking aspect emerged when the deceased girl's body was examined. There were no signs of struggle or attempts at self-defense, suggesting that the event occurred suddenly and the victim had no time to react. The body bore approximately 24 stab wounds of varying depths, with the fatal blow delivered to the heart, claiming Ellen's life. The investigation's gross negligence in examining the crime scene and the victim's body will be revisited later. This oversight allowed crucial evidence to go undetected, permitting a potential perpetrator to remain at large. What was even more bizarre was the police's behavior, who, even before the medical examination, seemed to think that Ellen's injuries were self-inflicted. The fact that Ellen had been experiencing panic attacks and was seeing a psychologist and was on prescription medication led them to believe that she had attempted to take her own life. Ever since she had started suffering from an anxiety disorder, Ellen had been prone to panic attacks. The situation was so severe that she had sought professional help from a psychologist. She tried not to burden her family with her concerns, and they, in turn, had attributed the changes in her behavior to pre-wedding stress and excitement. The psychologist who worked with Ellen had prescribed her 2 medications to help manage her anxiety, which she took regularly. As the psychologist would later report, neither of these medications, whether taken separately or together, could have had any adverse effect on Ellen's mental state, leading her to contemplate death. The specialist also noted that, despite her anxiety, Ellen had never had such dark thoughts. Ellen's friends and colleagues observed a change in her behavior after she moved in with Sam. She became anxious, restless, and hesitant to make decisions without consulting him. Whenever faced with a situation, Ellen would say she needed to discuss it with Sam and couldn't give an answer without his input. Ellen's parents also noticed these changes, but whenever their daughter tried to open up about her emotional struggles, she would insist that Sam was not the cause. Interestingly, 3 weeks before the tragedy, Ellen told her mother that she wanted to quit school, drop everything, and move back to her parents' house. Her mother was taken aback but reassured Ellen that she was always welcome to return home, no questions asked. However, Ellen never mentioned it again. Later, it was suggested that after the couple moved in together, Sam became violent towards his fiancée, and she lived in fear, too afraid to confide in anyone about the abuse. Although the psychologist Ellen saw did not confirm or deny this, they observed that Ellen struggled to put her feelings into words and describe what was troubling her. It seemed as though she wanted to reveal something significant, but her fear held her back. The case was plagued by inconsistencies and unanswered questions from the start. What's striking is that nobody made a serious effort to investigate these anomalies. The investigation was remarkably sloppy, with the crime scene and body examination poorly handled and expert analysis lacking. Many crucial details, facts, and evidence were disregarded and lost forever, making it impossible to reconstruct the events of the incident accurately. There were no signs of self-defense injuries on the victim's hands, suggesting that she did not try to fight back. Her body, however, showed multiple bruises. According to her fiancé, these were likely caused by her participation in team sports. Ellen's parents disputed this, stating that their daughter had not had time for sports or gym activities recently due to her busy work schedule and active wedding preparations. No suicide note was found, and Ellen's body showed signs of a brutal attack. Yet, investigators quickly suggested that she might have taken her own life. The presence of food spices and a cutting board on the kitchen table led them to theorize that Ellen had started preparing dinner, only to suddenly decide to end her life by cutting herself with a knife. However, the autopsy revealed that Ellen's body had nearly 24 stab wounds of varying depths, with 10 of them inflicted from behind. Given the severity of some of these wounds, medical experts questioned how she could have continued to move and inflict such injuries on herself, eventually stabbing herself in the heart. This raised serious doubts about the initial suicide ruling. Despite these contradictions, the investigation stuck to its original version, refusing to open a criminal case. The main reason cited was the lack of evidence of an intruder in the apartment and the absence of any signs of self-defense. Some concerns were raised about the possibility of forced entry into the apartment due to the unusual latch on the inner part of the door. This latch could be closed from the outside, but not fully. If the latch had been fully closed from the inside, it would have been impossible to break it open with a single shoulder blow without damaging the doorway. However, based on the nature of the damage, it appeared that the latch was only partially closed, which would have been possible from outside the door. Sam testified that he sought help from a security guard, who accompanied him upstairs and witnessed him kicking down a door. However, the guard disputed this, stating that he never left his post. Despite this discrepancy, the investigation did not pursue the matter, deeming it irrelevant. The investigation reviewed footage from a single surveillance camera leading to the gym, which showed Sam walking towards the gym and then returning. Although it is possible that Sam exited through another passage and returned to the gym during the intervening time, his alibi was not investigated, and potential witnesses who could confirm or deny his presence at the gym were not interviewed. Sam didn't call the police until an hour after he discovered the door was locked, and his fiancée didn't respond to his knocking and shouting. When he finally made the call, the officer who took it noticed that Sam was acting strangely, despite his frantic screams and wails. The specialist was suspicious of Sam's behavior, thinking it was an act, because although he was calm enough to answer questions, his voice wasn't shaking when asked to start administering first aid. At first, Sam questioned the need to do so, then calmed down, and finally mentioned a knife stuck in his girlfriend's chest, which he claimed not to have noticed earlier. It's worth noting that before calling the police, Sam called his parents and his lawyer uncle, who arrived at the apartment before the police and went with Sam to the station to make a statement. The next day, Sam and his uncle went back to the sealed-off apartment to collect some personal belongings, taking all of Ellen's electronic devices, 2 laptops, a phone, and a tablet. A few days after the investigation began, detectives unexpectedly decided to examine the devices in question, only to discover that the search history contained queries related to suicide. When police officers arrived at the scene, they conducted a brief investigation and hastily concluded that Ellen had committed suicide. Even when new evidence came to light, they refused to reconsider their initial ruling. The sequence of events surrounding Ellen's wounds couldn't be determined, but it was clear that the fatal blow was to the heart. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy found this unusual and decided to conduct a further investigation. He sent a sample of Ellen's spine to a specialist to determine if her spinal cord was damaged. If it was, Ellen would have been paralyzed and unable to inflict the fatal wound herself. However, the specialist suddenly changed his mind, abandoned the investigation, and claimed that the spinal cord was intact. Despite this, the report was never attached to the case files. The authorities also overlooked the fact that, despite the extensive wounds on Ellen's body, there was very little blood at the scene, suggesting that someone may have cleaned it up. No one bothered to search for potential signs of blood being washed away. The luminol that could have been used to detect blood traces was ignored. Additionally, the trash cans in the apartment were not examined, which meant that any potential evidence they may have held was lost forever. The Greenberg family broke the devastating news to Ellen's parents about their daughter's death, as they were the first to arrive at the scene. Although Ellen's family lived several hundred miles away, they rushed to the location as soon as possible. Santa and George were in shock, refusing to accept that their daughter would take her own life. However, they were left with unanswered questions about the events of that night, and received only a vague conclusion with no criminal investigation. Frustrated, the Greenbergs family decided to launch their own inquiry with the help of independent experts. A private detective, intrigued by the case, offered his services for free. After reviewing the evidence, the detective concluded that Ellen's body had been moved after her death, evident from a dried blood trickle from her nose to her ear and smeared stains on the floor resembling drag marks. Furthermore, a guard recalled that Sam, who had sought help, was wearing boots, not a tracksuit as he had claimed. Despite the presentation of new evidence and witness testimony, the parents of the deceased were once again refused a criminal case or further investigation. In addition, they were refused access to case files, which included a recording of Sam's phone call to the police and surveillance footage. Years later, a young officer joined the county's homicide unit as an assistant prosecutor. Having heard about the unsolved and unusual case while studying at the university, he decided to conduct a further investigation. During his inquiry, he discovered that the injury to the back of Ellen's head suggested she may have been attacked from behind, and that there was no evidence of a spinal cord injury, contradicting the official conclusion. After re-examining the preserved spine fragment, an independent specialist concluded that the spinal cord had suffered damage in multiple areas, making it impossible for Ellen to have caused further harm to herself. Despite this, the police declined to initiate criminal proceedings. In 2018, the coroner officially ruled that all 20 wounds were self-inflicted, but Ellen's grieving parents filed a new lawsuit in 2019, alleging that the coroner and experts had not done their jobs properly. Although the lawsuit was heard and settled, the trials did not begin due to the pandemic. Ellen's family, friends, and colleagues are convinced that she could not have taken her own life, citing her aversion to the sight of blood and low pain threshold. The parents created a social media page to share official documents, new information, and alternative theories. In the summer of 2022, the case was dismissed once again, but the Greenbergs managed to transfer it to the district attorney's office, where a new prosecutor took over and reopened the investigation, 11 years after the tragic events. However, to this day, the investigation remains unfinished. After the tragedy, Samuel made an effort to stay in contact with his estranged father-in-law and mother-in-law for the first year. However, he did not participate in the investigations they initiated. He refused to cooperate with the police and showed no interest in the case. He openly accepted the official account that his fiancée had inflicted the fatal injuries on herself. Samuel soon found comfort with another woman and married her just a year later. He and his new wife moved to a different state and ended all ties with the Greenberg family. Today, Samuel and his wife are raising 2 children together, and he tries to forget about his deceased ex-fiancée. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Buchanan family. Molly met Adam Buchanan, a divorced father of 1, when she applied for an office manager position at his company. At the time, Adam was raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage on his own. Molly, a cheerful and sociable blonde, immediately caught the attention of the company owner, and the interest was mutual. They started a romance, which turned into a serious relationship, and Molly eventually moved in with Adam. Molly, who dreamed of a loving and friendly family, made an effort to build a strong bond with her stepson Nolan. Soon, she became pregnant, and they had a son named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a close-knit family of four. Adam, who owned a construction company, earned a comfortable living, and the family even purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The cabin was rustic with no electricity, water, sewer, or gas, but Adam, being in the construction business, actively worked on remodeling it, and the family frequently visited the cabin. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., the Garden Valley Fire Department responded to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, western El Dorado County, on Highway 193 between Coloma and Georgetown. Upon arrival, they found that the fire had destroyed 10 acres of the property, and the cabin had burned to the ground, with charred remains in the ashes. The fire department personnel left the scene untouched. At 11 a.m., firefighters alerted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office to the fire scene, unsure of what they were dealing with. Initially, they suspected a pet might be trapped inside the house. However, upon arriving, the coroner faced a challenging situation. The house was still smoldering, making it impossible to inspect the interior. They had to wait for the flames to die down and the temperature to decrease. Once the coroner could examine the house, they detected the pungent smell of burnt flesh and soon discovered a human skull and charred torso. It became apparent that the tragedy had claimed a life. The officer called for backup, and additional officers from the sheriff's office arrived to conduct a meticulous investigation of the scene. The evidence led to an obvious conclusion: the isolated cabin, located in a remote area, was not the primary residence of its owners, but rather a vacation retreat. A Dodge truck and trailer were found on the adjacent property, and running the license plates could identify the owner. It was possible that the owner was the wildfire victim. It was quickly discovered that the vehicle and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by Adam Buchanan. Buchanan, the owner, lived 160 miles away from the accident scene, a 3-hour drive from Bonita, California. This information supported the police's initial assumption that the house served as a country retreat for city dwellers who vacationed there to escape the hustle and bustle. It remained unclear who was inside: the company's owner, Mr. Buchanan, or someone else. The detectives began their investigation with the owner's name as their first clue. The Bonita police officer's task was to verify that all of Buchanan's family members were safe and at home. At the correct address, the officers arrived at the Buchanan's driveway, where they noticed a white Ford pickup truck. When they knocked on the door, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage answered, looking surprised, and asked what had brought them to his doorstep. To avoid alarming the household, the officers decided to first establish who was present in the house. They didn't want to assume that the company car's disappearance was necessarily linked to the owner himself. It could have been taken by someone else from the company. Nolan Buchanan informed the officers that his father, Adam, had left for the weekend to his country estate, 160 miles away, with his partner Molly and their 8-year-old son Gavin, and they were expected to return in the evening. According to Nolan, his father had entrusted him with taking care of the house. Although the remains found in the cabin were not yet confirmed to be those of the Buchanans, the information gathered and the discovery of 2 sets of remains by the evening of September 13th were enough to declare the family missing. The El Dorado County Police visited Nolan's home on September 14th to question him further and determine who had perished in the fire. However, they were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan, who explained that their son, the cabin's owner, regularly visited the property to perform his own repairs. The parents were extremely worried, having been unable to contact their son or daughter-in-law until then. The officers learned that the house relied on generators for power, but it had no electricity at the time of the incident. The presence of gas cylinders inside the cabin led to 2 possible theories. The fire could have been either an accident or intentional. By Sept 15th, investigators collected evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit, which changed the case's direction. A skull with a bullet hole was found, revealing a homicide, not an accidental fire. Forensic DNA testing showed the bullet was lodged in the victim's thigh. The skull belonged to a child, making murder the primary focus. The fire was intentionally set to destroy evidence. Next, investigators sought to determine the circumstances. Burglary gone wrong, family suicide, or a grudge against Adam Buchanan of Buchanan Construction? Investigators pursued the theory that Molly's murder was a crime of passion, examining her life for enemies and her marriage for clues. As leads dried up, they focused on the troubled relationship, marked by abuse, sleeping apart, and intense arguments. Molly's mother feared they'd kill each other, yet Molly stuck with Adam, briefly fleeing with their son. The couple enjoyed hunting near home, where guns were common. Police suspected another fight escalated. One spouse shot the other, then took their own life. However, an inconsistency emerged. If the tragedy was caused by a conflict between the husband and wife, logic dictates that the instrument of the crime would be found near the remains of one of them. But this was not the case. Investigators theorized that the weapon might have been damaged in the fire, making it less conspicuous than expected. Over 5 days, forensic team members meticulously sifted through the ashes in the home, conducting a meticulous search. Despite their thoroughness, they did not find the expected result. No weapons were discovered in the house. By this time, the forensic examination results were in. The examination confirmed that the DNA of the bodies matched Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the bullet wounds ruled out the possibility of suicide. The lack of firearms suggested that a 4th person, unknown until then, was present in the house, shot the Buchanans, and the investigation had to start anew. Police had no option but to turn to 16-year-old Nolan, the son of the deceased. Nolan informed the officers that his family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. According to Nolan, his father chose to use the company vehicle instead of his personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because the truck and trailer were already loaded with rocks to decorate the area around his country cabin. This was the truck that police found near the burned structure. When questioned about why he didn't accompany his relatives on vacation, Nolan reiterated that he had to stay behind to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that there was a neighbor growing illegal marijuana on the edge of the Buchanan property, which had led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor, with his father demanding that the neighbor stop planting it and threatening to report the issue to the police. When discussing the family business, Nolan revealed the company's financial struggles, including downsizing and a significant reduction in employees from what his father had mentioned. The business debts were accumulating rapidly. The investigation now had valuable information and a suspect, specifically a neighbor, given the common link between violent crime and illegal drug cultivation in that area. The detectives believed the threat of reporting to the police could have led to the murder of Buchanan and his family. However, the issue was that they didn't know which neighbor they should focus on. After the family's murder, the financial crisis engulfing their business had to be addressed. On September 18th, the police visited Adam's company and questioned the employees. As Nolan had warned, the company was in dire straits, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, some employees lost their jobs. Interestingly, some of the fired employees were bitterly unhappy with their dismissal and could potentially be suspects in the crime. During a community cleanup, students found a purse with Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's IDs and a .22 caliber rifle hidden nearby. This led detectives to a new theory. The killer used the rifle and took their documents to cover tracks. The discovery was crucial because it suggested that the killer had gone to great lengths to reach Greenwood, murder the family, and then return to Bonita to get rid of the evidence. This suggested that the killer was likely a local resident of Bonita. The fact that the evidence was found near the location of Buchanan Construction reinforced the theory that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Detectives sent the gun and the bag of documents to be examined and requested a warrant to search the company's records and premises. Here, during the search, they discovered a video surveillance camera installed on the firm's premises, which was directed not at the company's territory, but at the center of the parking lot. Since it was known that the family had gone out of town on Friday, the investigators reviewed Friday's footage and were surprised to find that Adam had attached a trailer filled with rocks to a white Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had initially told them. This discovery revealed that Adam had deliberately misled the investigation. If the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the driveway of the Buchanan family home. Investigators decided to re-interview Nolan, aiming to keep him safe while gathering as much information as possible. This time, they asked him specific questions, such as what movie he had seen at the cinema, how he had paid for shopping at the mall, and how he had paid for dessert on a date. Unaware of the implications, Nolan mentioned that he had used his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search the Buchanan home in Bonita, search their vehicles, and examine their financial records. The Ford automobile sat in the driveway, its wheels caked with reddish soil, similar to that found in Greenwood. This suggested that the car had recently been driven on the dirt roads of Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip earlier, some soil might have remained on the wheels, but it wouldn't have been as noticeable. Unfortunately, the fire had destroyed any wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup indicated that the car had probably been to Greenwood recently. Further investigation revealed that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card on Friday, September 11th, at a Taco Bell fast food chain on his way to Greenwood. However, Nolan claimed he stayed home and didn't accompany his parents, and that he had the credit card in his possession. Detectives reviewed the security cameras at the diner and saw what they expected: a white Ford, not a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt dated September 11th that listed 4 drinks, not 3. Similarly, evidence collected at the scene of the fire pointed to 4 drink cups, indicating that Nolan had been in the car. On Saturday, September 12th, Adam and Molly used a credit card at the Valencia Club Bar in Penin, about 30 minutes from the cabin. This was a familiar spot for the couple, as they would often stop by after working on the cabin. Security cameras at the bar recorded the time they left, and traffic cameras on the highway helped track their route back to the cabin. The cameras showed that a Ford F-150, driven by Adam and Molly, headed towards the Buchanan cabin around 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire. Then at 3:30 a.m., the same vehicle was spotted driving in the opposite direction, but this time with only Nolan inside. Later that morning, on Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used to make purchases at 3 different businesses in Bonita: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed that Adam only had 1 credit card, which contradict Nolan's previous statements. By the time the forensic results were back, Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun, leading to his arrest in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan maintained he was not guilty of the charges against him, and instead, he spun a tale claiming his father had shot the family, then pointed a rifle at him. Nolan said he took the weapon away in self-defense, accidentally shooting his father in the process. Nolan attributed his subsequent actions, including setting the house on fire, to a state of panic and extreme fear. Throughout the trial, the defense emphasized Adam's history of abuse towards Nolan and other family members. However, the medical examiner questioned the verdict due to the inconsistent angle of the bullet wound on Gavin's skull, suggesting it was fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. Nolan countered that he and his brother's beds were adjacent, and they were both awakened by the noise, and screaming. He claimed to have seen someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin, then pointed the rifle at him. According to Nolan, he pushed the attacker away, which would have resulted in a shot fired at around a 45 degrees angle, contradicting the forensic evidence. The prosecution's theory is that Nolan killed his brother when they were alone in the house, while their parents were out at a bar. After waiting for his father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot and killed them as well, as evidenced by the position of the bodies. The sequence of events suggests that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Next, Nolan took the rifle, his parents' papers, doused the bodies with gasoline, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met up with his girlfriend, and spent the day with her, thereby establishing an alibi for himself. On July 13, 2018, a jury delivered a guilty verdict on 3 counts of first-degree murder against Nolan. As a result, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In announcing the sentence, Judge Kingsbury acknowledged the verbal and physical abuse Nolan had suffered, as well as the testimony that he killed his brother to spare him from further suffering at their father's hands. However, she also highlighted the premeditation of the crime, the subsequent arson, the creation of alibis, and Nolan's plans to take over the family business, which he had shared with relatives. The judge referenced Nolan's failure to comply with rules and erratic behavior, as reported by staff at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where he was sent following his arrest. The judge informed Nolan that he, like anyone, has the opportunity to reform, and that if he exhibits good behavior, he may be eligible for parole in 25 years. Despite this, Nolan maintains his innocence, and if he is eventually granted parole, he will be required to pay a substantial amount of compensation to the victims, the exact sum of which has not yet been determined. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Birbeck. Lindsay was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Birbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lindsay moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lindsay would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lindsay went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughter Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lindsay was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lindsay was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lindsay multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lindsay a text message saying, "Where are you?" "We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times. When Lindsay didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lindsay's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lindsay's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lindsay missing, stating, "Lindsay seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lindsay's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lindsay personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Coppice for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lindsay's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lindsay's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lindsay. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Coppice at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lindsay alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Coppice, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lindsay Bobek's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lindsay Bobek was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18th while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lindsay's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardial Hill Trail. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lindsay's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lindsay's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lindsay Bubeck appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lindsay's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lindsay's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death, despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lindsay's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lindsay was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Bubeck indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers who were moved by Lindsay's story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabriela Alcaino. Gabriela Alcaino was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, the capital city of Chile. She was the only child of Federico Alino and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, close-knit family. Her paternal uncle, Rodrigo, who served as her godfather, and her grandfather, Carlos, both adored her deeply, with Carlos regarding her as the central figure in his life. Gabriela grew up in a loving and supportive environment, despite her family's modest means. Her parents, though not wealthy, worked hard to provide her with a good education and upbringing. When Gabriela was 5, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father, however, remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a sweet and friendly child, who was a bit shy but made friends easily. Her gentle nature and lovely appearance earned her admiration from those around her. She excelled academically, enjoyed music, dance, and art, and her parents encouraged her talents. Gabriela cherished her relationships with her younger half-brothers, spending quality time with them at her father's nearby home during weekends and holidays. Overall, Gabriela's childhood was a happy and carefree time, filled with love and support from her family. Gabriela's first love was at the age of 15. She fell for Fabian Chasis Aravan, a fellow student who was a year older. At first, their relationship was innocent and sweet. They would walk together, share ice cream, and steal kisses. Fabian came from a good family with well-respected parents who valued education and raised him to be a good person. However, Fabian was a quiet and private person who struggled with social interactions. He would avoid eye contact and turn away from others, leading many to think he was just shy. Gabriela's father met Fabian and thought he was a calm, dependable, and responsible young man. He had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela, and Fabian promised to do so. Initially, Fabian made an effort to be attentive and caring. However, as time passed, a different side of Fabian emerged. He became controlling and cruel, revealing a darker aspect of his personality. Fabian's controlling behavior dominated the relationship. He was intensely jealous and dictated who Gabriela could and couldn't interact with. He monitored her phone activity, insisting on instant responses to his calls and messages, regardless of the time. If she failed to comply, he would throw tantrums, displaying childish and abusive behavior. During the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela attempted to downplay Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, believing they would eventually subside. Blinded by her love for him, she tried to meet all his demands and held on to the hope that he would revert to the caring and gentle person she initially fell in love with. Fabian's behavior became increasingly irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He emotionally drained Gabriela, progressing from verbal abuse to physical mistreatment. He would slap her, pull her hair, or grab her hands, often leaving no visible marks. However, bruises would occasionally appear on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. Gabriela tried to hide her situation, but her loved ones noticed her depressed state and frequent tears. She was no longer her usual cheerful and outgoing self, instead withdrawing from friends and avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from seeing. Gabriella repeatedly tried to end her relationship with Fabian, but he would not let her go. Despite her efforts to break free, he would pressure her into getting back together. This cycle of breaking up and reuniting continued for over a year, marked by Fabian's stalking, threats, and harassment. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. Although the details of the incident were unclear, he was accused of mistreatment and assault, which could have led to jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school. He was forced to complete his education through homeschooling. When Gabriella finally decided to end the relationship for good, Fabian became angry and desperate. He apologized and promised to change, begging her to take him back. However, when she refused, he began to stalk and harass her. He would show up at her school or home, even attempting to climb into her room through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, trying to intimidate her into resuming their relationship. Gabriella was determined to end the relationship, despite Fabian's erratic behavior. His messages veered wildly from apologetic to threatening, but she remained resolute. However, Fabian's actions were unpredictable and frightening. He would often vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had moved on, only to reappear and resume his harassment. Fabian's behavior was relentless and intrusive. He would follow Gabriella everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing public scenes. His outbursts were loud and intimidating, leaving Gabriella feeling anxious and fearful. As a result, she became reluctant to be alone, always seeking the company of friends or family after school. She would often meet her mother at work and travel home with her, or ask her father or uncle to accompany her on trips. This constant vigilance took a toll on Gabriella, leaving her exhausted and drained over several months. A devastating series of events began to unfold for the Alcano family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife, taking her life in a tragic turn of events. At the time, the children were at school and Federico was at work, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Fortunately, the perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior conviction, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother rallied around Federico, offering emotional support and helping him care for the children during this difficult time. Although Gabriella's thoughts were temporarily diverted from Fabian, who had gone missing around the same time, she remained focused on her own goals. She was busy preparing for entrance exams, hoping to secure a spot at one of Santiago's most prestigious universities, where she aspired to study journalism or advertising. However, this tragedy was only the beginning of a series of heartbreaking events that would soon befall the Alcano family. In May 2018, Fabian suddenly re-emerged, beginning a campaign of obsessive stalking that made Gabriella feel unsafe in all aspects of her life. He was able to access her property by climbing over the fence and even showed up at places she regularly visited, such as the supermarket and the mall. By early June, Gabriella was so alarmed by his behavior that she sent screenshots of her disturbing messages with Fabian to her two closest friends, including audio recordings where he explicitly threatened her and demanded they restart their relationship. Gabriella was secretly living in fear for her own safety and that of her loved ones, but she chose not to share her concerns with her family to avoid causing them unnecessary worry. On June 10, 2018, the Alino family came together to celebrate a milestone birthday, Carlos's 80th. Tragically, this joyful gathering would turn out to be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening had begun on a happy note, with the house filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of a big family meal. As they celebrated Carlos's special day, everyone wished him good health and many more years to come. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and her uncle Rodrigo's children, but despite the festive atmosphere, she seemed somewhat preoccupied and distant. Her uncle noticed her unease and decided to approach her, asking if everything was okay and if something was troubling her. Gabriella gave a sad smile and shrugged, but didn't explain why she was nervous. Her uncle chose not to pry, thinking she would open up when she was ready. However, he later regretted not pressing her for more information. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and reassured her that she could always count on him for support. He then returned home with his younger children. Tragically, this was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and first wife alive. In the early hours of June 11th, a horrific crime took place. Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He planned to sneak into Gabriella's bedroom through the window and attack her. However, just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on, and the back door creaked open. Carolina, who had been unable to sleep, had gotten up to investigate the noise. Fabian pounced on her, pushing her back inside, and began stabbing her repeatedly. Fabian brutally stabbed his Carolina 36 times, with most of the wounds inflicted on her chest, neck, and head. This attack was fatal and left her with no chance of survival. Carolina only managed to scream a couple of times before falling silent. The noise from the attack woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to see what was happening. As she went down, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and clearly enraged. He caught hold of her and dragged her down. Gabriella was desperately trying to call the emergency services with her phone, but she couldn't make the call. In a horrific act, Fabian attacked Carolina and stabbed her once in the chest, piercing her heart and instantly killing her. He then moved her body to the kitchen. After the murder, Fabian tried to cover his tracks by wiping away his fingerprints and cleaning the bloody footprints. He also washed himself and the knife in the bathroom. After cleaning up, Fabian left the house quietly around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. Following the event, Federico appeared unaffected. However, concerns grew when Carolina, typically a reliable and communicative colleague, missed work for 2 consecutive days without answering her phone. Her employer contacted Federico, asking him to find out what had happened to Carolina. When questioned, Federico was surprised and claimed to have called Carolina, but she was unreachable, as was Gabriella, whose phone was off. Next, Federico phoned his brother, Rodrigo, but Rodrigo stated that he had neither seen nor heard from the missing individuals since their friend's birthday. Following the phone call, Federico decided to pay a visit to Carolina's home. The property appeared uninhabited. Nonetheless, Carolina's vehicle remained in the garage. Without forcibly entering, despite possessing a spare key, Federico merely checked on the status of the property. Federico called the police and asked them to check the house, but he didn't enter himself because he was afraid of what he might find. The police officers were puzzled by this, especially since he had a key. When they finally entered the house at 11 a.m., they found the lifeless bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor, surrounded by pools of blood. Despite the obvious fact that the women had been dead for over a day, Federico was overcome with grief and irrationally demanded that the police call an ambulance to save them. The police had to calm Federico down, but his behavior raised suspicions, and they took him outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he became agitated and demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was the main suspect in the double homicide. Federico was shocked and devastated by this turn of events, unable to comprehend how he could be suspected of killing his own daughter. Rodrigo arrived shortly after and was equally shocked to learn that his brother had not been released. He was also struggling to come to terms with the investigation revealed that Gabriella's friends reported that she was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, Fabian. Screenshots of his threatening messages and voice recordings, which included a disturbing phrase, "It's easier to take her life than to let her go," were also obtained. This came as a shock to Federico, Gabriella's father, who recalled that Fabian seemed pleasant when they first met, despite his daughter's failed attempts to break up with him. The contrast between the heinous crime and the normalcy of Fabian's daily life, where he spent time with family and friends and posted light-hearted photos on social media, made his crime all the more inconceivable. After being taken into custody, Fabian responded to allegations with pretended astonishment and anguish, falsely claiming his innocence and feigning affection for Gabriella. Fabian had gotten rid of the object used to commit the murder and thrown away some clothes with blood on them. However, there were still small drops of blood on his shoes, and footprints matching his shoes were found at the scene of the crime. Additionally, 4 of Gabriella's classmates said they heard Fabian threaten her, saying it would be easier to kill her than let her go. Because of the evidence and what the witnesses said, Fabian admitted to the crime, but tried to make himself look like a lover who was deeply hurt. The defendant claimed that his intention was not to harm Gabriella, but rather to have a conversation with her. However, the situation escalated, and he ultimately treated her mother as an unwanted witness. He struggled to provide a reasonable explanation for bringing a hunting knife to the encounter, which was supposedly meant to be a conversation. Following the autopsy and other necessary examinations, the victims' bodies were released to their family for burial. A large crowd gathered at the funeral to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was laid to rest in a white dress she had always wanted to wear but never had the chance to. Coralina was buried in a closed casket due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who developed a strong defense strategy, aiming to secure a minimal sentence for his client. During the initial court hearings, the lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean record, pointing out that the attack on his classmate had been resolved outside of court. However, the victim's family pushed for a more severe charge of femicide, which was rejected by the prosecution due to the specific requirements of Chile's law. Since Fabian and the victim were not in a romantic relationship at the time of the crime, the case did not meet the criteria for femicide. The lawyer also argued that Fabian had acted on impulse and was in a state of distress when he committed the crime. As a result, Fabian faced a potential 15-year sentence for the double homicide and assault charges. The victim's family, understandably, demanded the maximum punishment for Fabian. After the initial hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious. He lost 2 loved ones to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the murders of his ex-wife and daughter might receive a lenient sentence. The defense lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this excuse. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights groups, proposed Gabriella's Law. This law would broaden the definition of femicide to include intimate partner violence, regardless of whether they was married or cohabiting. The National Office for Women and Gender Equality soon joined the cause, actively pushing for the law. Although the bill faced opposition due to concerns that it could lead to new charges and stricter penalties for perpetrators already in prison, feminist groups nationwide rallied behind the Alino family. They organized marches and demonstrations in support of Gabriella's Law. In August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, significant changes were made to Chile's femicide law. Known as Gabriella's Law, these amendments aimed to strengthen the country's response to violence against women. The law now defines femicide as any act of violence, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to hatred based on her gender, regardless of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Additionally, the law considers it an aggravating circumstance if the victim is a minor or has health issues. In April 2022, Fabian Ceres went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years earlier. Thanks to Gabriella's law, the defense had limited options. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances because one of the victims was a minor, as well as with double homicide and assault. On April 20th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was delivered, Federico and Rodrigo spoke to the court, expressing their gratitude to the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no punishment could restore the life of their loved ones, Carolina and Gabriella, but emphasized that a life sentence for the perpetrator would serve as a safeguard, protecting other women from suffering a similar tragic fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ilana Frick. Ilana Christina Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, to George and Anna, who had immigrated to Canada from Croatia in the early 1970s. She was the younger of two daughters, with an older sister named Caroline, with whom she was extremely close. Ilana's birth was considered a miracle by her parents. Her mother, Anna, had faced serious health complications after her first pregnancy, and doctors had told them that Anna would likely never conceive again. Anna and George made a significant effort to ensure their daughter's well-being and meet their needs, in spite of the difficulties they faced. They both worked at a car factory, striving to give Ilana and Caroline a good education and a comfortable life. Growing up, Ilana was a diligent and passionate student. She spent most of her free time reading, also found time to attend dance classes, practice gymnastics, and compete in track and field events. During her summer breaks, Ilana chose to work to help support her family, often working in cornfields and learning to manage her finances wisely. As she progressed through school, Ilana excelled in math and science, and by the time she reached high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. Ilana graduated at the top of her high school class and was accepted into a prestigious medical university. Around the same time, she started dating Matthew Ryan, a classmate from high school who was also studying in the same department. They maintained a long-distance relationship after graduation, with Ilana moving to Ottawa to pursue a residency program at the university. Matthew, on the other hand, chose to work at a local hospital and did not pursue further education. Despite the distance, Ilana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002. They had even made plans to get married, but ultimately decided to remain friends. By then, Ilana was interning at a top clinic and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had not advanced. In February 2003, during a night shift at the hospital, Ilana met Mohammed Shamji, a new colleague. She was immediately drawn to him. Mohammed, who was just a year older than Ilana, was a resident in the neurosurgery department and came from a family of prominent doctors. Mohammed Shamji was born and raised in Ottawa, Ontario, into a family of medical professionals. His father, Farid Shamji, was a well-known surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a talented psychiatrist. Mohammed's older brother, Ali, also pursued a career in medicine, becoming a medical biophysicist. Both brothers attended Yale University, and later, Mohammed returned to Canada to earn his doctoral degree from the University of Western Ontario. Additionally, Mohammed had taken an interest in a blonde woman, but at first, he did not make any attempts to approach her. Ilana was immediately drawn to Mohammed, a tall, dark-skinned man, and sought to capture his attention. He eventually asked for her number and initiated contact, marking the beginning of their romance. Initially, Ilana perceived Mohammed as a reserved individual who hesitated on dates, jumped between topics, or fell silent, giving the impression of being introverted. However, it was later discovered that his behavior was not due to shyness but rather a lack of interest. Unbeknownst to Ilana, Mohammed was seeing another woman at the time and intentionally kept this a secret. When Ilana discovered she had a rival, she became resolute in her determination to be the only woman in his life. The first year of their relationship was tumultuous, with they breaking up on 3 separate occasions, rekindling, This was largely due to Ilana's persistence in pursuing the relationship. Despite her parents' awareness of the issues and their encouragement to leave Muhammad, Ilana remained resolute, convinced that she had found her soulmate. Ilana often showered Muhammad with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only sporadically reciprocated her affection. Muhammad seemed content to accept Ilana's displays of love without feeling obligated to return them. This dynamic created an emotional imbalance, where Ilana grew increasingly dependent on Muhammad. In the summer of 2004, Ilana and Muhammad received unexpected news: Ilana unplanned pregnancy. A sudden life-changing event forced them to rethink their future plans. While both were anxious about the news, Muhammad felt a strong obligation to marry Ilana before the baby was born, as is traditional in his conservative Muslim upbringing. In September 2004, they had a two-part wedding. The first ceremony adhered to Muhammad's family's cultural customs, while the second was a more casual celebration with friends at a popular restaurant. At the time, the newlyweds seemed happy and in love. However, their happiness was short-lived. When their daughter, Yasmin, was born in January 2005, their marital problems became apparent. Muhammad's focus on his career and education left Ilana and their newborn daughter feeling neglected. To make matters worse, Muhammad had been hoping for a son and wasn't afraid to express his disappointment. This marked the beginning of a troubled marriage that would ultimately end in tragedy. After having her child, Ilana took maternity leave to care for her daughter and manage the household. When Muhammad returned home, he would often go straight to his room and spend very little time with his wife and children, which left Ilana feeling abandoned and unappreciated. As time passed, Muhammad's behavior worsened, and he became increasingly critical and abusive. He would insult Ilana's appearance, refuse to eat her cooking, berating and insulting his wife. Despite her growing unhappiness, Ilana chose not to confide in anyone, including her close friends and parents, about her marital problems. However, one day, while Ilana was on the phone with her mother, Muhammad returned home in a bad mood and began berating Ilana in front of her mother. Ilana's mother tried to defend her, but Muhammad shifted the blame onto Ilana, claiming she was responsible for their troubled marriage. Ilana's mother advised her to end the relationship with Muhammad and file for divorce, but Ilana declined, hoping that she could still salvage the marriage. Unfortunately, Muhammad's actions worsened, and he started physically harming Ilana on top of the verbal abuse she had already been enduring. The situation reached a boiling point in the summer of 2005 when Muhammad punched Ilana in the face, breaking her nose. Fearing for her safety and that of her child, Ilana fled to friends and reported the incident to the police, finally deciding to end the marriage and leave Muhammad for good. Muhammad surprisingly begged his wife, Ilana, to come back, vowing to never physically abuse her again or even raise his voice. He promised that their family life would be perfect and he would control his temper. However, Muhammad's sudden change of heart was motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to start at Duke University, working towards his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would ruin his promising medical career. Muhammad's primary concern was his own future, but he successfully convinced Ilana to drop the charges against him. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would pursue his studies. Ilana's loved ones were confused when she didn't leave her husband despite the difficulties she was facing. Instead, she moved to another country with Muhammad. When they encouraged her to reconsider, she stood her ground. When the family settled in the US, life appeared more tranquil for a time. Muhammad earned a highly competitive spot in an elite engineering program. Meanwhile, Ilana joined Duke University on a full tuition scholarship. Their relationship grew stronger and became more confident in their decision to have more children. After the arrival of their daughter Fiza, they welcomed another child. Unlike their son's relatively smooth birth, Fiza's delivery was more challenging. The new addition to the family brought immense joy, and they felt grateful for their family growing closer. What secrets lay hidden behind the perfect facade of this family? In the late summer of 2009, Ilana and her husband, along with their children, returned to Ottawa, Canada, and settled back into their home. Ilana, however, soon ended her maternity leave and secured a job as a family doctor at a renowned hospital, quickly building a solid reputation. Her husband, meanwhile, juggled work, studies, and teaching at a university. As social media gained popularity in the late 2000s, they started a personal blog that portrayed them as an ideal family. They shared photos of their vacations, accomplishments in science, and luxury lifestyle, complete with a lavish home. They even posted about attending prestigious conferences and trendy resorts. To outsiders, they seemed like a happy, successful, wealthy, and deeply in love couple with no problems. However, this perfect image hid a dark reality. Behind closed doors, Mohammed continued to exert strict control over Ilana. He monitored her interactions, dictated what she wore, and even checked her email and social media accounts. He openly criticized her appearance, style, and parenting methods, leaving Ilana feeling silent and trapped. As time passed, the tension and aggression between them became stressed, with Mohammed frequently yelling at Ilana and blaming her for their arguments and discord. In 2011, a prestigious medical center in Calgary offered a talented neurosurgeon, Mohammed, a fellowship in spinal surgery. Mohammed accepted the offer and relocated to Calgary, but he had to leave his family in Ottawa because his wife, Ilana, couldn't take a leave of absence from her job for over a year. They had to manage a long-distance relationship. During one of Mohammed's visits home, their relationship faced its biggest challenge yet. While at home, Mohammed accidentally left his laptop open, and Ilana saw a message from another woman on his social media account. The content of the message implied a romantic involvement. When Ilana confronted Mohammed, he confessed to having an affair, which was a devastating blow to Ilana. Ilana's family believed that this was the final straw, and they were convinced that she wouldn't forgive Mohammed again. However, Ilana decided to give their marriage another chance. Mohammed promised to end the affair, and they decided to start fresh in Toronto, where Mohammed had secured a high-paying job. Despite this fresh start, their marital issues persisted. After their move to Toronto, Mohammed expressed his desire to have a son, and Ilana agreed to try again, hoping that a new child would bring stability to their family. In October 2013, they had a son named Marius, a long-awaited addition to their family. Despite the new baby, his behavior towards his wife remained unchanged. Over the next few years, he devoted himself to his medical career, becoming a skilled and respected neurosurgeon known for his ability to tackle complex cases that other doctors avoided. Meanwhile, the wife also advanced in her career, becoming a representative for the Ontario Medical Association. However, the tension between them began to escalate, and his behavior towards his wife became increasingly aggressive. He went beyond verbal abuse, resorting to physical violence against her. During a family ski trip, the wife suffered a deep cut on her arm that required stitches, as well as other injuries. She initially claimed that the injuries were a result of a skiing accident. However, she later confided in her best friend that the injuries were actually inflicted by her husband. Following another heated argument over his latest infidelity, Ilana discovered that her husband, Mohammed, was having an affair with a colleague. After overhearing a suspicious phone conversation, Ilana confronted him, which led to a violent outburst, and he physically abused her. A friend, who was aware of the situation, advised Ilana to end her marriage, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Ilana should retaliate by having an affair of her own. Although the suggestion was made in jest, Ilana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her unfaithful husband. During the summer of 2016, their relationship continued to deteriorate. Their children were away at camp or staying with their grandparents, leaving Alana and Muhammad to face their marital problems alone. In a surprising turn of events, they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary in early September, even sharing the news on social media. However, their happiness was short-lived, as they began discussing divorce just a week later. Despite his marital transgressions, Muhammad refused to acknowledge his actions as grounds for divorce, claiming that he was happy with his current situation. On the other hand, a desperate Alana initiated an affair with a co-worker who had been flirting with her, escalating their relationship turmoil. Elena found herself swept up in a new romance, feeling cherished and adored by her partner. This was a welcome change from her current situation, and she reveled in the long-absent sensation of being loved and desired. However, her personal life was about to take a dramatic turn. A fierce argument erupted in the family on November 25, 2016. Elena informed her husband that their divorce was unavoidable. The following day, she consulted with a divorce attorney and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. While Elena was away, her husband, Muhammad, sent her a series of messages, begging her to reconsider and work on saving their marriage for the sake of their children. Elena returned home on November 30th and made a final phone call to her parents. Although her voice betrayed some anxiety, she reassured them that everything was okay. Unbeknownst to her family, Elena had attempted to call the police that evening, but in her distress, she accidentally misdialed the number, leading to a devastating outcome. On December 1st, Anna tried to contact her daughter Ilana but was unable to reach her. Concerned, Anna called her son-in-law Muhammad to ask what was wrong. Muhammad claimed that Ilana had packed her bags in the middle of the night and left him and their children to be with her lover. However, Anna and her husband were skeptical of Muhammad's story, knowing that their daughter would never abandon her children. They asked a close friend of Ilana's to keep an eye on the Muhammad home while they traveled to Toronto to report Ilana's disappearance to the police. The friend reported that Ilana's car was still parked in the driveway, which only added to the family's concern. When Anna and her husband arrived at their daughter's house, they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first. However, Muhammad was agitated and insisted that Ilana was with her lover, repeating the same story he had told the police earlier. After Ilana was reported missing, a shocking discovery was made. The police found a body inside a suitcase. A man walking his dog by the river on December 2nd noticed a new-looking suitcase under a bridge about 24 miles from the suspect Muhammad's home. His curiosity got the best of him, so he opened the suitcase, discovering the body of a blonde woman. The police were immediately notified, and the body was taken to the medical examiner for identification and analysis. Fortunately, identifying the owner of the suitcase was not difficult because the perpetrator had left the luggage tag attached, which still had her name and travel information from her recent trip. Her parents confirmed the identity as Ilana. An autopsy revealed her cause of death to be mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. Additionally, her body showed signs of abuse with multiple bruises and abrasions. Notably, the victim was found dressed in pajamas with no shoes. Considering the victim's position in clothes, it appears she was placed inside the suitcase immediately after her death. The investigation led to the suspect's arrest later that evening at a coffee shop. Evidence indicated he was planning to leave the country. A lawyer accompanied the suspect during his meeting at the time of arrest. However, law enforcement thwarted the escape. Subsequently, Muhammad, the prime witness turned suspect, was arrested, formally charging him with Ilana's first-degree murder. Muhammad denied any involvement in the incident, but a disturbing detail soon came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unintentionally witnessed her mother's murder. Yasmin reported hearing screams and noise coming from her parents' room, prompting her to rush there. She opened the door slightly and saw her father kneeling behind the bed, while her mother was likely on the floor, out of her sight. Muhammad ordered Yasmin to leave the room immediately, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told his daughters that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had occurred, but she couldn't fathom that her father was responsible for her mother's death. To avoid putting his daughter through the trauma of testifying in court, the accused confessed to the crime. He recounted the events of that fateful evening, stating that he and his wife had argued over her alleged infidelity and desire for a divorce. Muhammad claimed that he didn't intend to harm his wife, but the situation escalated rapidly. The argument turned violent, and when his wife tried to call the police, he knocked the phone out of her hand. She began screaming, and Muhammad struck her multiple times in the face before pinning her to the floor and strangling her with his hands. Muhammad's daughter entered the room, but couldn't see what had happened behind the bed. By the time Muhammad realized his wife was not breathing, it was too late. In a desperate attempt to revive her, he made a fatal mistake, breaking her neck. Panicked, he placed her body in a large suitcase and drove around for hours, unsure of what to do. Eventually, he stopped at a small bridge over a river and threw the suitcase into the water, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation, hidden in the darkness. During the trial of the surgeon, a scandal emerged involving his father, Ferd Shanji. The elderly man made derogatory comments about his deceased daughter-in-law, trying to justify his son's actions by claiming she had been unfaithful and provoked him. As a result, his medical license was revoked. Muhammad was found guilty of second-degree murder in April 2019 and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he may be eligible for parole in 14 years, considering the time he served during the trial. This means he could be released as early as 2030. Additionally, Muhammad was prohibited from contacting his children or his wife's parents and was ordered to pay them a substantial amount of compensation. His medical license was also permanently revoked, preventing him from practicing medicine or teaching again. The children who have lost their parents are now being cared for by Ilana's parents. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, a small town in Stormont County, Ontario. Little is known about his family and early life. He remained single and childless, working as a gas station attendant and a security guard on film sets. Those who knew him described Adam as quirky and eccentric, often coming across as superior to others. He enjoyed debating and arguing to prove his point, but was not typically confrontational. A review of his social media profiles revealed Adam's interest in BDSM practices, which he openly discussed and shared photos and videos about. Although he never had a long-term partner, some former partners accused him of being a sadist who subjected them to physical and emotional abuse, leading to the end of their relationships. Adam also had a peculiar hobby of writing reviews of adult films and magazines. It appeared that watching such content was a significant part of his free time. Despite his unusual interests, Adam presented himself as a calm and composed individual, showing no outward signs of a troubled or criminal nature. The story took an unexpected turn 4 months later when at the end of December, when David Wood's family moved into the house at 19 Macmillan Drive in Oshawa, they were immediately struck by a strange and unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, Adam Strong, a 45-year-old single man who lived in the other half of the house, reassured them that it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix within a few days. Although Adam was friendly and polite in his communication, there was something unsettling about him that put the Wood family on edge. When David's wife tried to welcome him with some homemade cookies, Adam wouldn't even let her into his apartment. Instead, he stepped out into the hallway, closing his door behind him. In that brief moment, David's wife caught a glimpse of Adam's living space, which was in disarray, and the smell inside was overpowering and foul. Adam borrowed cookies from his new neighbor and quickly left. Later, when they met in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that his apartment was a mess due to upcoming renovations. Despite his efforts to be polite, he seemed nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore a persistent smell. However, on December 29th, they called a plumber to fix a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. The problem seemed minor, but what the workers found in the pipes shocked even experienced forensic experts. Plumber Sean Funn and his partner began to clear the blockage in the Woods' apartment. Although they were accustomed to unpleasant odors, they were surprised by the terrible smell inside. They soon realized they needed to investigate further and descended to the apartment below, which belonged to a man named Adam. Adam reluctantly let the workers in, apologizing for the mess. The smell was even worse in his apartment, and when the plumbers reached the source of the blockage, the stench became unbearable. Sean, a seasoned plumber, had never encountered anything as foul-smelling as this in his years of practice. However, an even more disturbing discovery awaited him and his team when they decided to clear the pipe. Adam, already on edge, became increasingly agitated, refusing to step away and bombarding the workers with questions about their methods and estimated time of completion. He later claimed he was simply curious, having never witnessed this process before. The specialists tried to brush off his behavior, but their efforts were soon overshadowed by the gruesome discovery of over 10 kilograms of flesh, hair, and bone fragments in the pipes. Sean was horrified to find disfigured and partially decomposed human fingers among the debris. Adam feigned surprise, claiming he had never seen anything so disgusting, and then asked the plumbers if they had any idea how this could have ended up in the sewer pipe. Sean decided to call the police immediately to report the disturbing discovery. He informed them that he had likely found human remains and provided the address. He made sure Adam didn't touch or disturb anything, preserving the evidence. When the officers arrived, they quickly confirmed that Sean's suspicions were correct. Human flesh had been extracted from the pipes. The police then spoke with the Adam. He admitted that a woman's body had been stuck in the pipe. He even revealed that other body parts were stored in his refrigerator's freezer. Upon investigation, the police found a severed head and limb fragments packed in plastic bags, which were too large. The house was extremely filthy and cluttered, with a kitchen filled with dirty dishes and rotting food, as well as trash covering the floor. Empty pizza boxes were scattered around, and numerous magazines of an explicit and masochistic nature were present among the mess. Various adult toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and restraint devices were also discovered. Adam Strong was arrested at the scene and taken to the police station for questioning. His arrest puzzled the authorities, as he had no prior run-ins with the law and was not a person of interest to the police. Mr. Adam had resided at 19 Macmillan Drive in Oshawa for over 10 years, dating back to 2007, without incident or complaints from neighbors. The House of Horrors at 19 Macmillan Drive, Adam's residence, was secured and guarded as a crime scene. An initial inspection revealed a complex and time-consuming process lay ahead, with investigators expecting to uncover more shocking evidence. The discovery of a head in the refrigerator was just the beginning. Evidence found at the scene led law enforcement to suspect a connection to Rory Hash, whose torso had been recovered from a body of water 4 months earlier. A tattoo on the neck and subsequent DNA analysis confirmed that the discovered remains belonged to Rory. Further investigation revealed blood-stained clothing and shoes belonging to she, hidden among trash in various rooms of the house. The bedroom was particularly disturbing, with blood traces found on the bed, walls, furniture, and ceiling. These bloodstains were later confirmed to belong to a missing schoolgirl. A dissection table was also found in the kitchen, suggesting it was used to dismember and gut the victim. The entire scene was gruesome, with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments scattered everywhere, causing nausea in those who witnessed it. The bathroom was extremely dirty and unsanitary, with signs of a violent crime visible everywhere, including dirt, blood, and broken fixtures. The toilet was dismantled and lay in a corner, surrounded by garbage. It appeared that the perpetrator, Adam, had attempted to dispose of a body by cutting it into pieces and flushing them down the sewer. However, he encountered a blockage and, when his attempt to fix it failed, left the scene in disarray. Inside the house, a large number of sharp objects were discovered, which likely had been used to dismember the victim. Some of the objects, including knives, still had blood on them. Further analysis of the evidence, including DNA samples, revealed that Adam had semen on fragments of the victim's body, which had been found in the refrigerator. Rory Hash was born on July 9, 1999, in Oshawa, Ontario, to Shannon Dion, a single mother. Rory's father was not present in her life, having left before her birth. Despite this, Rory grew up in a loving and supportive family environment provided by her mother and maternal grandmother. Rory's family had an unconventional background, with her maternal grandfather founding and leading the motorcycle club Satan's Choice. He was also a skilled boxer with connections to organized crime. Additionally, Rory's uncle was a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club and led a troubled life, frequently encountering legal issues. However, this did not affect Rory's childhood, which was remarkably peaceful and carefree. Rory excelled academically and had a passion for dance, winning awards in competitions. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, responsible, and compassionate. At the age of 13, Rory earned top honors as a cadet in her local army unit, showcasing her exceptional qualities from a young age. At 15, Rory's life took a downward turn. A friend introduced her to drugs, and she quickly became addicted. She started spending time with the wrong crowd, neglected her schoolwork, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, her family tried to help her overcome her addiction by sending her to various treatment centers, but she relapsed each time. At 17, Rory ran away from home and began working in the sex trade to support her habit. Rory eventually sought help from a specialized service for teenagers struggling with addiction. With their support, she was able to enter mandatory treatment and turn her life around. She found a job at a local shop, studied remotely to earn her high school diploma, and even started thinking about attending college. Rory also started a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony, and they decided to move in together in the spring of 2017. When Rory discovered she was pregnant, she was nearly 18 and felt ready to take on the responsibility of motherhood. Her mother supported her decision, but was unaware that Rory had started using illicit substances again. In mid-August, Rory met with Crane at a shopping center. Crane had been keeping an eye on her for 18 months to ensure she didn't fall back into her old habits. During their meeting, Rory revealed that she had started using drugs again and had lost her job a month prior. She also admitted to exchanging intimate favors for money or drugs. Crane was deeply concerned and promised to help. He asked Rory to wait while he made a call to arrange for her to be hospitalized. However, when he returned, Rory was gone. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her in a state of incoherence due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue for about an hour, but when they returned, Rory was nowhere to be found. Security footage showed that she had simply gotten up and walked out of the hospital. Her family reported her missing the following day, but despite a thorough search and widespread social media attention, Rory was never seen again. Rory's exact circumstances of arrival at Adam's house are unknown, but it is probable that she went there seeking drugs in exchange for sex. The investigation started when Adam informed the police about the location of Rory's remaining body parts. Initially, investigators anticipated Adam would admit to the crime, but when he was taken to the station, he became uncooperative, refused to answer questions, and denied any involvement in Rory's death, all while remaining calm. The only charge filed against Adam was desecration of a body, as there was not enough direct evidence to link him to the murder. Despite his lawyer's efforts, Adam was not granted bail and stayed in jail until his trial. Investigators attempted to get Adam to reveal more information by provoking an emotional response, but he remained cautious and avoided discussing Rory's visit to his house and his potential involvement in her death. However, Adam freely talked about his interest in bladed weapons and his large collection of knives. A search of Adam's house uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a dirty hunting knife hidden in a closet with dried skin fragments that appeared to be human. DNA testing revealed that the samples on the knife did not match Rory's, but belonged to someone else. It took several months to identify the person, but by July 2017, investigators had confirmed that the DNA on the knife belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, she who had gone missing about 10 years earlier. Candace shared many similarities with Rory Hash. Both struggled with addiction and had run-ins with the law. They came from troubled families and often ran away from home, sometimes disappearing for months at a time. To survive, they would often exchange sex for food and other necessities. Candace was born in 1989 and was 18 when she disappeared. Her family did not realize she was missing until almost 2 years later, by which time any potential leads had gone cold. Many people believed that Candace's lifestyle and social circle meant she could have gone anywhere. For 10 years, her parents thought she might have run away and would eventually return home. However, news from law enforcement in 2018 destroyed their hope of ever seeing their daughter alive again. A striking feature of the case was the physical resemblance between Candace and another victim, who was the same age. The police believed they had caught a serial offender. The suspect, Adam, also confessed to harming Candace. However, Adam refused to provide information about Rory unless the police agreed to improve his prison conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet, and his favorite meals. Although law enforcement was outraged by Adam's demands, they agreed in order to gain valuable information. Adam began by sharing his troubled childhood, revealing that he was abused by his stepfather from age 5 and started harming animals at age 7, deriving physical pleasure from these acts. He also discussed his unusual intimate preferences and expressed frustration at not finding a partner who shared these interests. When discussing Rory, Adam described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in the act, but later regretted his plumbing had failed him. However, when questioned by police, Adam denied responsibility for her death, claiming she had died from an overdose and he had only disposed of the body. When asked about Candace, a case from 10 years prior, Adam was caught off guard and attempted to learn how the police had discovered the connection. Upon hearing about the human remains found on an old knife, Adam became subdued and regretted not taking better precautions to avoid detection. He admitted to meeting Candace but denied killing her. Despite a lack of evidence to support his claims, Adam unintentionally incriminated himself during the investigation. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he shared his account of events. However, when informed that the victim, Rory, was pregnant at the time of her death, Adam strongly denied this fact. The police noted that the pregnancy was in its early stages, and therefore not visibly apparent. Adam claimed that he would have noticed if she was pregnant, sparking a realization among the investigators that he would stop at nothing to argue his point. To uncover more information, the police told Adam that Rory was pregnant, which led him to attempt to prove the contrary. In his eagerness to refute this, he shared graphic details about how he had personally examined her body and held her reproductive organs in his hands. Adam's account was detailed and included his physical sensations, describing the flesh as soft and warm. At one point, he even mentioned feeling a pulse. These statements raised suspicions that Rory may have still been alive at the time. Unfortunately for Adam, his entire narrative was captured on camera, and his incriminating statements were presented as evidence in court. When confronted about his earlier statements, Adam tried to retract his previous admissions, but it was too late. The defendant, Adam Strong, refused to reveal what he had done with Candace's body, and despite extensive searches, her remains were never found. Investigators also failed to identify any other potential victims. During one of the final interrogations, Strong showed no remorse, saying, "I don't know if it matters, but I'd like to extend my condolences to her parents." During the trial, Strong's lawyers argued that he was mentally ill and therefore not responsible for his actions, claiming he needed medical treatment rather than punishment. However, the court had to decide whether he was sane and accountable for his crimes or if he should be committed to a psychiatric facility instead of serving time in prison. A psychiatric evaluation found that although Strong had certain mental health disorders, he was aware of his actions and could be held legally responsible. Strong's trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace disappeared. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted guilt, the evidence found in his home and his statements during interrogations confirmed his involvement in these horrific crimes. 4 of Adam's former partners testified against him, describing his cruel and violent behavior. The prosecution presented evidence that Adam had lured 2 women to his home with promises of money in exchange for intimate services that catered to his specific preferences. Once they were in his home, he would immobilize and torment them for an extended period. In the case of Rory, he likely killed her during the ordeal because he feared she would report him to the police. On September 4th, a signal from Adam's phone was detected near the city harbor, where he had discarded Rory's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was found guilty of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Rory's remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adam showed little remorse, stating that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months after his sentencing, Adam unexpectedly revealed the location of Candace's remains. Following his directions, the police conducted a months-long search that ultimately led to the discovery of human bones. DNA testing confirmed the skeleton's identity as young Candace Fitzpatrick, and this was officially announced. Investigators now strongly suspect that there may be at least one more female victim in the Adam case. During Adam's initial interrogation, his personal belongings were seized, including a chain with 3 rings. Adam asked for the chain's return, explaining that the rings held sentimental value and he didn't want to lose them. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their daughters, but the origin of the 3rd ring remains unknown. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Agnes Klavina. Agnes Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She grew up in a typical family with her parents and older sister, Greta. They sisters were extremely close, with only a couple of years between them. Their parents worked hard to provide them with a good education and support their dreams. Agnes was a lively and outgoing young girl who excelled in school, enjoyed sports, and had many friends. Her dream was to pursue a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved to travel and was skilled at organizing fun leisure activities. Her bright personality and attractive appearance also drew attention from men, who frequently complimented her. From a young age, Agnes had many admirers vying for her attention. After completing her education, Agnes worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying to become a tourism manager. At 20, she decided to leave her hometown in Latvia and move to London, seeking greater opportunities to develop her skills and talents. Her parents and older sister supported her decision, and soon after her move, Agnes met Michael Mills, a successful businessman 8 years her senior. He was well educated, owned a thriving business, and had recently opened a movie theater and entertainment complex. Agnes and Michael quickly connected and started dating. He showered her with attention, gifts, and luxury travel. They made ambitious plans for their future together, and their love seemed destined to last. Agnes's friends and family remember this as her first true love. She radiated happiness beside Michael and envisioned a future as his wife. In 2014, Agnes received a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. This opportunity required her to temporarily relocate, but she was eager to take on the challenge. Michael, unable to leave his life behind, supported her decision to sign the contract. For Agnes, this was a chance to gain valuable experience and potentially launch a new career path. Marbella, a renowned resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracts vacationers from around the world, particularly the wealthy. It's not uncommon to spot celebrities, athletes, and business leaders in the area. Kavina, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news of her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael upon her return to England. Her family was thrilled for Agnes and wished her well. In May 2014, Agnes packed lightly and moved to Spain for the season, while Michael remained in London. They stayed in touch through daily phone calls and video chats, sharing updates about their lives. Agnes was active on social media, posting daily updates, photos, and videos, which drew a large following interested in her life and work. Agnes had a vibrant and busy life, making the most of every day. After her employment contract ended, she decided to stay in Spain for a couple of months. The resort was entering its peak season, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. She discussed her plan with her Michael, who was supportive and promised to visit her for a few days since they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Agnes quickly landed a job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her lease. As planned, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her in September. During his visit, they had a great time, planned their upcoming wedding, and picked a destination for their honeymoon. Michael had to return to London after less than a week, leaving Agnes to work in Spain for another month. After that, she planned to visit her relatives in Latvia before flying to England to join her Michael. Unfortunately, these plans never came to fruition. Agnes went to the popular Costa del Sol nightclub with friends on September 6th. Earlier in the day, she had informed Michael of her plans and he approved. Agnes and her friends had a great time at the club, and Agnes even posted some photos on her online profile. She wore a striking mini dress and carried a small white clutch that night. As the night wore on and her friends prepared to leave, Agnes decided to stay a bit longer and then take a taxi home. Her friends didn't worry about her, as she was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. When they said their goodbyes and headed out, Agnes was chatting with a man who had bought her a drink and was trying to get her attention. After that night, Agnes disappeared without a trace. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. No one could recall what time she left the club, who she left with, or where she went afterwards. Agnes failed to show up at work the next day, and attempts to contact her were unsuccessful as her phone was turned off. Her colleagues and friends immediately raised concerns, but the police were slow to respond to the missing persons report. As the day drew to a close, a worried Michael called Agnes's mother to report that he had been unable to reach his fiancée all day, which was unusual. The following day, Agnes's parents and Michael jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report her disappearance, but they were informed that a missing persons report could only be filed in person by a relative. Undeterred, Michael and Agnes's family booked the next available flight to Marbella. It wasn't until 5 days after Agnes's disappearance that her family was able to file a missing persons report. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment, which appeared to be untouched, as if she had simply stepped out for a short time. Her documents, money, and expensive jewelry were still in place. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared meals, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had been preparing to go out, likely to the club on the night she vanished. To aid in the search, Agnes's friends and family distributed flyers with her picture throughout the city, and the media picked up the story, featuring it on TV news programs and the front pages of local newspapers. The police reviewed footage from CCTV cameras inside and outside the entertainment venue, but encountered a setback. The files had already been deleted. However, with the help of specialists, they were able to recover the recordings. One of the restored videos, taken by a camera near the parking lot exit, showed Agnes leaving the club around 6 a.m. with a man. It was clear that she did not leave voluntarily. The final footage, which showed Agnes alive, was thoroughly examined by experts. However, the more they studied the footage, the more alarming it became. Agnes was seen being led by a man to the parking lot, clearly under duress. He had a tight grip on her waist, and Agnes looked frightened. She attempted to break free multiple times and appeared to be saying something emotional, but he persisted in leading her to a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows. As he forced Agnes into the car, it became clear that another person was already inside. Meanwhile, the first man got into the driver's seat. Agnes temporarily managed to open the car door and tried to escape, but he who had been standing next to her, likely the doorman, intervened and pushed her back into the car at the driver's signal. In return for his assistance, the driver appeared to hand the doorman something, presumably a cash reward. Agnes's phone was turned off 6 minutes after she got into the car, and it was never turned back on. The vehicle's subsequent movements couldn't be tracked because there were no CCTV cameras along the route. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last people to see Agnes before she went missing. Despite this, the case was shrouded in secrecy from the start. Everyone involved in the investigation signed confidentiality agreements, and information was kept from the press and even Agnes's loved ones. For the first few months, Agnes's parents and Michael were left in the dark, with only vague updates that the investigation was ongoing and that it was too early to draw conclusions. As time passed without any word from Agnes, hope began to dwindle. Agnes's fiancé, Michael, periodically gave interviews pleading for help in finding her, but no one ever came forward with information. It wasn't until 6 months later that Agnes's relatives were finally shown footage from the club's cameras and given the names of the 3 men who had last been in contact with her. Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy British millionaire, was identified as he who forcibly removed Agnes from a club and pushed her into a car. Wesley Capper was accompanied by his longtime friend, Craig Porter, who had no specific occupation and had previously been on the police's radar. A third man, Cyan Usman, a dark-skinned doorman, was also in the car. Under interrogation, all 3 men claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnes had voluntarily gotten into the car. According to Wesley Capper, he and a friend had met Agnes at a club and approached her to strike up a conversation. Wesley Capper claimed that Agnes was already intoxicated, but this contradicts the testimony of her friends. He also stated that Agnes had accepted a drink from him and his friend. Capper then invited Agnes to continue the party at his luxurious country home, which she allegedly agreed to. However, Wesley Capper claims that Agnes changed her mind once they were in the car and asked to be dropped off in the middle of the road, stating that she would take a cab home. Wesley Capper claimed that he dropped Agnes off at her requested location, which was an unlit stretch of road with no CCTV cameras. Craig Porter couldn't confirm or deny Wesley Capper's statement about Agnes's presence in their car. According to Porter's own admission, he was also extremely drunk and didn't know how or when Agnes got into the vehicle. He fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and only woke up to find Agnes was no longer in the car. The doorman, Cyan Usman, confirmed that Agnes was intoxicated, but he couldn't say if she voluntarily got into the car. However, he did say that when the car moved, Agnes opened the door and nearly fell out. The driver then asked him to close the door, for which he received a large tip. When questioned, Sean Usman said he didn't think Agnes's attempt to get out of the car was an escape attempt. In his opinion, she might have accidentally opened the door due to her intoxication. He also noted that Agnes didn't scream or ask for help during the incident. The security footage clearly shows Wesley Capper forcibly leading Agnes to the car, holding her by the waist and wrist. However, Wesley's defense is that Agnes was dizzy and he was only holding her to prevent her from falling. Later in the investigation, another unsettling video came to light, shot in the south of Spain, specifically at the Puerta de la Dua in the Seu Grande Marina. The footage was of the luxury yacht belonging to John Capper, a millionaire and the father of one of the suspects. Dated September 10th, just 4 days after Agnes went missing, it showed Wesley Capper and 2 other men boarding the yacht. Notably, they carried a heavy suitcase and what appeared to be a rolled-up carpet. However, when questioned about this footage, Wesley Capper explained that he and his friends had traveled to the yacht simply to have a good time. He claimed the suitcase was packed with their belongings and what seemed to be a carpet was actually bedding. Wesley Capper failed to account for where everything had gone, considering none of these items were seen upon their return. The investigators meticulously searched the yacht and the automobile, only to find nothing of consequence because both vehicles had been thoroughly cleaned, thus destroying any possible DNA evidence. Interestingly, during this exhaustive search, a blonde hair was found in a car trunk, although determining its origin was not feasible as the hair itself had strangely disappeared over the course of the investigation, marking another puzzle within this intriguing case. A few hours after Agnes was last seen in the defendant's car, Wesley Capper made several calls to emergency services, but hung up each time without waiting for an answer. It seemed as though he was afraid or uncertain about what to do. Wesley Capper claimed he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The lawyer for the Agnes family argued that Agnes was likely already dead, and her body was probably at the bottom of the sea, hidden in the suitcase the suspects had brought on board the yacht. He also believed that the case had been intentionally delayed, giving the suspects ample time to destroy any evidence that could prove their guilt. It wasn't until a year and a half after Agnes's disappearance that Wesley Capper, Porter, and Usman were finally brought to trial. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence, no further charges could be made. This decision outraged Agnes's relatives, but the judge stood firm. In 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnes's disappearance, the 3 men were brought to trial again. Despite the prolonged period, they continued to deny their guilt, claiming that Agnes voluntarily got into the car. The prosecutor argued that the doorman should be considered an accomplice for helping the defendants drive the victim away. The doorman, Usman, could have faced a 5-year prison sentence. Instead, he defended himself, stating that he was a suspect due to his skin color and lack of access to a good lawyer. He claimed that he sent all his earnings to a starving family in Africa. Wesley Capper and lawyers argued that their clients were only guilty of persuading Agnes to get into the car, not forcing her. They believed that Agnes was dropped off on the road as requested, but was possibly kidnapped and killed by someone else while waiting for a cab. The judge's verdict was met with surprise and anger from Agnes's relatives, as none of the defendants received any punishment. Usman was acquitted of all charges. Wesley Capper was given a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnes's intoxication to coax her into his car, and Porter received a 6-month sentence for aiding Wesley Capper's actions. However, they received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnes's family £101,000 in compensation. Agnes's family was unhappy with the outcome and decided to appeal. It later came to light that the defendants had both committed further offenses while awaiting the court's decision. Wesley Capper, who was intoxicated by alcohol and drugs at the time, hit and killed a woman with his vehicle and then fled the scene. Meanwhile, Porter and a friend, who were also intoxicated, stole a car after violently assaulting its owner. Wesley Capper received a surprisingly lenient sentence of probation for his serious crime, thanks to his lawyer's skilled defense. As part of his sentence, he paid a substantial amount of compensation to the family of she he had killed in a car accident. In contrast, Porter was not as fortunate and was sent to jail, although the exact length of his sentence is not publicly known. Nearly 7 years after Agnesa's disappearance, the prime suspect in her case finally faced consequences. However, it wasn't the law that caught up with Wesley Capper, but his own destructive lifestyle. Years of substance abuse took a serious toll on his health. During the -19 pandemic, Capper was hospitalized, and after beginning to recover from the illness, he suffered a stroke. He passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. At that time, Agnesa's parents appealed to the court again, but unfortunately, the suspect had since passed away and could no longer face prosecution. Despite this development, the case was still before the Supreme Court, although a new turn of events would arise 9 years later, long after Agnesa's fate had been presumed, her body never found, alive or dead. Following this, her parents, sister Michael, and their lawyer converged on a plausible theory. It suggested that the perpetrators had likely disposed of Agnesa's body in a suitcase that was secretly boarded on a yacht, eventually dropped in a distant, undisclosed part of the open ocean. In mid-June, a gardener at the exclusive Lida Golf Club in the Costa del Sol region discovered a mysterious object near the coast while cleaning the area. Upon closer inspection, the object turned out to be an old, badly damaged suitcase. The gardener did not attempt to open it and instead called the police. When law enforcement officers opened the suitcase, they found human remains inside. Further examination revealed that the remains belonged to she, approximately 25 to 35 years old at the time of her death. It was also determined that the suitcase had been submerged in water for around 10 years before washing up on the shore. Based on these findings, the police hypothesized that the remains might belong to Agnes, a woman who had gone missing 9 years ago. To confirm this theory, investigators are conducting DNA tests to compare Agnes's DNA with the remains found in the suitcase.